Okay, we're on. Okay, good afternoon. We're just about to start the 3 o'clock agenda. We apologize for being behind schedule, but it could be worse. During the declared emergency, Committee of Adjustment virtual public hearings are being conducted by electronic means through WebEx, an online digital platform, and streamed on the Toronto City Planning YouTube channel. These measures are necessary to comply with physical distancing requirements and a provincial order that limits attendance at public gatherings. This will be a virtual public hearing, and participants who have registered in advance will be able to make their presentations to the committee using WebEx, an online event that is being moderated by city staff. Anyone wishing to view the hearing may do so by watching on YouTube. Participants who have registered in advance will be connecting either by their computer, a phone or tablet app, or by telephone. All participants will automatically be muted on entry, and when your item is called, each participant will be unmuted by the moderator, one person at a time. Only the committee members will be participating by video. Any registered participants will be participating by audio only, and we also ask that you mute your devices until you are called on to speak. Land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. In accordance with sections 45 and 53 of the Planning Act as 1990 is amended, this meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Toronto is called to order. The Committee of Adjustment considers applications for variances from the provisions of the zoning bylaw that apply to the property, permissions to alter or extend lawful non-conforming uses, and consent to sever property to create new lots. Anyone who wishes to receive a copy of the decision of the committee on an application must submit a written request for a decision by email. Please ensure that you include your name, your address, and email address, because Committee of Adjustment and TLAB, in the event of an appeal, will be sending appeal updates and notifications by email. If you do not agree with the decision of the committee rendered here today, decisions may be appealed to the Toronto Local Appeal Body, TLAB, or in some limited circumstances, to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, or LPAT. Appeal instructions will be set out at the bottom of every decision. The hearing procedure is we'll first deal with deferral requests. I don't believe there are any that we know of at the 3 o'clock agenda, but we'll deal with that first, and then we'll go back and proceed in order, starting at item number 38. When an application is uncontested, the agent or applicant will only proceed with a presentation if desired and if required. The committee may ask questions and or take the matter into the committee for a decision. When the committee does not require a presentation, applicants are to advise the chair should they wish to address the committee. Each speaker, including the applicant agent, will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address the committee, and I will comment when you're reaching the 5-minute mark. When addressing the committee, please state clearly your name and address for the record at the outset, and please remember to confine your remarks to the matters outlined in the application. The applicant or agent goes first, makes a presentation to the committee of the application. Please note that the committee may not entertain revisions to applications here today at the hearing. The committee may decide to defer the application if being substantially revised in order to ensure that the application is both accurate and that all those entitled to notice of the application have been informed of the changes. Then individuals either in support or opposed to the application or with concerns will be invited to speak. Again, they can maximum 5 minutes. Committee members may ask questions of each speaker after they finish their presentation. Now, in terms of making presentations, when we're here in person, the parties usually meet outside the room. They try to narrow the issues. Even among the objectors, they usually meet, appoint a couple of spokespeople, typically those that are represented by council or ones that are most directly affected by the application. So we don't necessarily need to hear from everyone. I know that people have to appear in order to preserve appeal rights. We just point out that repeating the same concerns that have been raised by other speakers does not advance your cause. So certainly if you have something to add, we'll welcome you to speak, but we don't have to hear the same comments by various speakers over and over again. When all other speakers are finished in opposition or with concerns, the applicant is given an opportunity to, or their agent, to respond to those concerns and answer any questions, but not to introduce more new information. And that will then mark the end of the discussion on an application. It's then taken into committee for a decision. Okay, before we get started, are there any declarations of interest of panel or staff to declare at on the 3 o'clock agenda items? Okay, if none to declare, deferral requests. There's none that we know of at this point for this time slot. Okay. So in that case, we can start with item 38 A, B, and C. 9 NORDALE CRESENT, which is an application for consent to sever the lot into 2 underside lots. And on each of the 2 new lots, first of all, to demolish the existing dwelling and to erect on each of the lots as divided, being the site of a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. We have plans, grading plan, memo from from engineering services, forestry, planning. We have planning with concerns recommending refusal of the application, as well as Councilor Nunziata echoing that. We have over 40 objection letters. We have quite a number of people registered to speak. And in the late arriving materials, Urban Forestry is also requesting refusal. And we do have a revised, updated engineering and construction services memo that has been updated. It says, Mr. Carvalino, it says it's dated December the 7th, 2020. Oh, it's the same one, but it's something wrong with the date. So in any event, okay. So we have a lot of speakers registered on this. So we're going to hear first from the applicant, or the agent rather, Shervin Farzam Baboudi from Shahan Homes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, it's going to be Mr. Chris Pereira. Mr. Baboudi was the designer, but Chris Pereira is in fact the agent, and he will be speaking.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Pereira.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Chris Pereira. I am the principal of EDGEHILL Planning and Design Limited. We are the planning and urban design consultants for this application. Our office is located at 25 Valleywood Drive, and that's in Markham, Ontario. As of late last week, we received the forestry memo. I think it was on the 18th, actually. We received the forestry memo late in the day, and based on that, I would like to formally request a deferral to give us the opportunity to review that memo in detail, consult with our arborist to understand what the city's concerns are in detail, and then, if feasible, address forestry concerns. So based on our inability to really do anything since the 18th, I would like to request a deferral to allow us to continue working with staff.
So this is with respect to the urban forestry memo to refuse the application. What about the planning memo? Because they recommended refusal. I'm not sure when you saw that. And I guess the main hurdle that you have to overcome is you're looking at lot frontage of 7.62 and lot areas of 3.0, 2.5, where I believe I've seen either in one of the neighbors' letters or in the planning memo that the smallest lots is 12 meters, and you're seeking to get 7.62 meter frontages and smaller lots. So I guess that's what you have to overcome that as well. So on the issue of deferral, I guess this is the first time up. Most of the other applications on this time slot are actually deferred from other hearings, but this is the first time this application is up. So I don't know how committee members feel, but if you're looking to make some changes, I guess mainly the main issue seems to be the lot, as opposed to what you're going to build on it, whether this should be 2 lots to start off, and then whether if you don't pass that hurdle, then you don't look at the variances for the 2 proposed detached houses you seek to build. So you're looking to defer this to deal with urban forestry?
That is correct.
And I guess we have to hear from I guess nothing's going to be built until then, so there's no hardship on the neighbors other than the fact that they've waited on the line here, and now we'll have to come back at another date after you put it back on the agenda. There would be re-notification just to let the neighbors know. So, yeah, I guess what we can do is we have a whole number of people registered to speak. We don't need to hear all of them on the issue just of the deferral. So the moderator is going to unmute everyone, and if anyone has any objection to the deferral that they want to let us know about, let us know about it. Otherwise, we'll take it that the neighbors are okay with the deferral, and hopefully, I don't know if sometimes we say, you know, if it's just an application for variances, that the applicant's going to make changes to make it more palatable. But in this case, I think the main objection is to the lot severance itself. So,
Good afternoon, Chair. It's Telegaz Dlolo from
Excuse me, sorry,
23
hold
Nordale
on.
Crescent.
Excuse me, please wait 1 second. Wait until the chairman addresses you, please. Thank you.
okay, so what we're doing is we're unmuting just to hear if anyone has a objection to the deferral request by the applicant.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, all registered speakers are unmuted. So if anyone has any objections, please say so now.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. It's Telegaz Dlolo from 23 Nordale Crescent, and I object to the deferral. We've been online for the past hour plus. And the issue here, as you've mentioned, is really about the lot size.
Yes, but I'm just saying the applicant typically isn't, you know, if they want to defer to make changes or they weren't aware of some of the reports. In this case, he mentioned the urban forestry one. Other than the fact you've wasted your time for an hour by being on the line, is there any other hardship to you and the other neighbors waiting for the applicant to see if he can resolve some issues, and then it'll be brought back on. You will be re-notified, and you'll have a chance to appear here, either virtually or if it's far enough away, maybe you'll be back here in person one day. So I'd like to hear,
Not only that.
other than the fact that the point that I mentioned, that everyone's had to stay on the line for an hour waiting to speak to this matter, what other hardship is there to you or any of the other neighbors, Mr. Diodlo, and I know you're located number 23, of having this thing put off?
Well, the application's been in place since 2019, and we had 2 weeks to respond to it. I don't see why the applicant cannot respond to urban forestry in the same time manner.
Okay. Anyway, you're entitled to your opinion. So is anyone else opposed to the deferral? And on what basis?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
Don Taylor here. Is the applicant aware that while forestry has upfront recommended denial of this application, later on in the same memo, they say that if we do not wish to deny the application, they would require conditions 2 and 3. And I'm just wondering if the agent is, in light of that, I guess, first of all, is he aware of that? And does that change his opinion as to whether he wants a deferral?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Committee Member Taylor, I am aware of, and we are aware of that kind of clause in the forestry memo that although they're recommending refusal, should committee decide to approve it, that they request that those 2 conditions be attached to it. We always attempt to resolve all forestry issues, and I believe in this case we can. The existing tree on the property is not healthy. My client has been waiting for 6 to 8 months for tree inspection people from the city to come to the site and make a determination on this. However, he's unable to really get somebody over to the site. So we are going to retain an arborist, and we do believe this tree is in decline. It is quite large, but it is in decline. It's dropping.
Okay, sorry, let's not get into the merits. You've answered Mr. Taylor's question. You're aware of that alternative, but you still would like your deferral. And you haven't had a deferral yet, so I don't know if there's anyone else with a reason, a real good reason why, you know, it's at the peril of the applicant until he gets his date. He could be delayed by months with getting back on another agenda. Until then, nothing's going to be built, so there's no harm to the neighborhood. He's not going to go ahead and demolish the house and split the lot until he gets permission from the committee, so that will be put off making the decision.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was on speaker or not. I'm just not understanding why we're getting a deferral.
Can you first of all identify yourself before you start speaking?
Sorry, it's Maria Moniz. Sure, sorry about that. It's Maria Moniz, 16 Nordale Crescent.
Okay, yes.
Just not understanding why are we getting a deferral in regards to the tree, because I thought the meeting for today was for the severance of the lot.
Yeah, that's correct. It is, but one of the departments who entitled to comment is forestry, and the applicant is saying, Mr. Pereira is saying he'd like to deal with forestry and digest all of this and try to come out and look at the property more closely to better fine tune that. And maybe he's also aware of the overwhelming objection to this application, both by area neighbors, by the planning department, by the councillor. So things often do get deferred, at least once. You can see the rest of our time slot is all deferred items from last August, last January, September. So it's not uncommon to have items deferred, and it's at the applicant's
It's not
peril, not at the neighbor's peril, because obviously he can't proceed until so if he's going to have a delay of a month or 2 months or 3 months, it's at his peril, not at the neighbor's. Okay, so
okay, understood.
thank you. You'll be re-notified, and you'll have a chance if they bring back the application. Maybe they won't proceed if they realize, they have a real tough hurdle here because they're seeking to have lots of 7.62 frontage, and the smallest one in the neighborhood is 12 meters. So they have an uphill battle, but if he wants to get a deferral, it's sort of his right to do that. So committee members, on the matter of the deferral of this application, does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Or is someone ready to bring a motion?
Danny Bellissimo has a question of the applicant. You're aware of the comments from Engineering, Construction Services Division, and Transportation Services?
I am, through you, Mr. Chair, I am aware of those comments. If I recall them, I'm just kind of going off of memory here, but I recall that they commented on the slope of the driveway, I believe it was.
Well, they're asking for a lot of more information, and I'm just wondering how you would react if we tied you to that as well, to consult with them, so you don't waste time with this committee coming back and not having their questions answered. Will you be okay with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would be okay with that. In addition to obviously seeking the deferral and looking at forestry things, there's a number of other things we'd like to look at. Could the changes based on discussions with forestry impact the variances potentially? So that's yet another reason why we're seeking the deferral.
My other question is, planning also has many questions and has opinions. I'm assuming you've talked to them before. Will you be willing to talk to them again before you come back to the committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are willing to talk to them, although I think we do have a bit of a difference of opinion on what is actually existing in the neighborhood. When we do come back, we will provide a very detailed photographic analysis of what we believe the community context consists of and why we believe our application is consistent with that, but that will be at a later date.
I don't know if any other members have any questions, but I'd be willing to make a motion for deferral. But because there is so much opposition to this and so much information back and forth, including from the councillor, I would like to move that the application be deferred, but understanding that the applicant will consult with planning, forestry, and ECS, which is Engineering Construction Services, so that more information is provided to everybody, including the people opposing it, when they come back the next time to make their fruitful conversation. That's my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. I would have a seconder for his motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. McCloskey. All in favor? Okay, the matter is deferred. I can tell you, we've already spent 14 minutes on this application without even hearing it. So hopefully we'll come back with something, or we'll deal with it in due course. So thank you, neighbors, for your indulgence, your patience to the applicant. And you will be re-notified when this application is put back on an agenda at some point in the future. Yes, okay, so we're going to just have to take a 2-minute adjournment here while someone fixes something on my computer. Next application is item number 39. Thank you for that indulgence. 42 AGAR Crescent. This matter was before the committee back August 27, 2020, at which time it was deferred. There were 8 variances. There are now 2 variances, a detached dwelling with an attached garage. So we've reduced 8 variances down to 3 in terms of seeing where deferrals do work to make changes. We have, first I want to thank staff, because what we've had is with these next applications, where it gets very confusing for committee members, is having the materials for the previous hearing commingled with no rhyme or reading. You have to go see if you have OG letters from August 2020, which obviously refer to the last date, and have to try to figure out while we're reviewing what's based on the old application, what's based on the new. So staff has now put that in a separate sub-file for us, which is much more manageable. We still have urban forestry condition, and like I said, only 2 variances remaining. And the speaker on this, we have Shervin Barzam Baboudi, the same speaker from the last application, same agent, as well as we have the neighbor, Mr. Diodati, at 44 Agar.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to advise you, Mr. Diodati from 44 Agar Crescent is not on the line. We tried to call him to reach him, but there's no answer.
Okay. I don't think we have a new, so we do have a new applicant submission, I guess documenting what's the changes that have occurred since the last time it was here back in August 2020. Mr. Baboudi, welcome.
Yes, greeting, good evening. This is Sherwin Farzan Behudi. I'm a designer, PNG, and the CEO of the Sand Homes. The address is at number 22 Allerton Road, located in the 1. I'm agent to represent number 42 Agar Crescent today. Any question, or do you want to just
I don't
briefly
think we need a presentation.
say
So
what we were
basically
asking for?
there was 8 variances, sir. You now only have 2 variances, correct?
Yes, correct. We changed totally the design,
Yes.
but in the end up we needed 2 variances. One of them is a floor index.
Yeah, it's
The
very,
area
very minor,
allows,
sir.
we have a
Sir?
45.
Yeah, I see. You're only 10 meters more than you before. You had community planning recommending refusal of many variances. You've now eliminated most of them, and you only have 2 small variances: 0.4 of a meter in soffit height, 0.02 times the area of the lot, or 10 square meters. So I don't think we need a presentation. Let's just see if committee members have any questions for you, sir, or if someone's ready for a motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, the neighbor was still wanted to speak, but he's not here. So, but these both variances appear to be very minor. Committee members, any questions, or are we ready for a motion? And we have an urban forestry condition.
Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied the variances meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I move approval subject to urban forestry condition number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion. Ms. McCluskey.
I'll second Mr. Taylor's motion.
Thank you. All in favor? You have unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Baboudi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful day.
Okay. Item number 40, 138 Laurel Avenue. This is an application that was deferred from January 21st, 2021. It's an application for a detached dwelling with an attached garage. There are 7 variances. There's a covering letter which says it was accidentally deferred. And they've made changes requested by transportation to the driveway. Yeah, I think there was a circular driveway that has now been revised to the satisfaction of transportation. So they say they're okay and there are no conditions. Speaker on this application is Michael DiPasquale, the owner of the property. Or actually, yeah, the owner of the property. Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so this was deferred apparently by mistake.
Yes, so it was communication error. I apologize. Last time the committee was on board with the variances and the city, other than the transportation condition. There's miscommunication because I had to come off of WebEx with my agent at that time. But regardless, it was down to the front landscaping, and we had proposed it was 66 or 67%. And even the committee was recommending this is a very small percentage. I think you'd want to accommodate miscommunication, whatever, he deferred it. But
Okay.
we've made these adjustments to accommodate 70%, accommodate transportation, and move the driveway, the circular part out of the right of way. So yeah, we apologize for wasting the committee's
well,
time, and hopefully,
hopefully your project was pushed back by, you know, quite a few months, 3 months. So luckily you're here, because if you were downtown and it takes longer to get back on an agenda. So in any event, looks like everything is in order here. Let's just see if committee members have any questions for you, or if someone's ready to make a motion on this.
Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied that the requested variances meet the 4 tests, and I move for approval unconditionally.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Seconded for Mr. Taylor's motion.
I just wanted to add something. I have a note here that says transportation has concerns. I don't know. I don't remember what that was about.
Yeah, that was
Perhaps
the last
the
time.
applicant knows what that was about.
Let the applicant answer, but I believe that transportation has now confirmed that the circular driveway has been revised to their satisfaction. Let's see where that is.
that's correct. So it was the part of the circular part at the top was part of it in the municipal right of way, but we have moved that up further to accommodate, and they have a letter of approving that revision.
Okay. So there are no longer any concerns with that.
Correct.
No.
In that case, I'll be happy to second the motion.
Yeah, and I can just tell you the memo is dated March 8, 2021.
Okay.
They have no longer having objections from previous time. Thank you. So we have
Happy
a
to
mover and a
second.
seconder. All in favor? Okay, matter is unanimously approved. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, next application is item number 41, 65 Oakfield Drive. And this is an application for to legalize and maintain a covered and uncovered deck in the side yard. And this was deferred from September 15, 2020 in order to consult with TRCA. TRCA is now advised they have no objection. That was in a letter dated March 16, 2021. And other than that, we don't have anything else on file. The speaker is Colin Lightbourne. Hello, Mr. Lightbourne.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. As you can see, this is a very simple application that is before you. Because of the fact that this is considered the front yard, and the front yard setback requirements is 2.34 meters, and the covered portion of the deck, because it slopes from the main setback towards the front lot line, that distance is 1.6 meters. So this is the only variance that we are requesting. It's a simple variance, and hopefully the committee would approve it.
Correct. Yeah, it's only the one variance, and it's a technical measurement from the front lot line because of this covered deck. And the reason you deferred is because TRCA was involved, and they're now okay with this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Committee members, any questions for Mr. Lightbourne, or is someone ready to bring a motion?
I'm prepared to make a motion to approve. Since TRCA is good with everything, the application is minor in nature, meets the 4 tests.
Thank you, Ms. McCluskey. Move a seconder for that motion.
I have an
Mr.
urban forestry concern that was, it was separate from the actual memo from urban forestry, but it was an additional a notice on, I believe, at the end of that application.
We have TRCA. Do we have anything from Urban Forestry proper as opposed to TRCA? Yeah, I don't have them on the checklist that they've given us. There was nothing on our consolidated memo from Urban Forestry.
It wasn't on the major checklist. It was on a separate sheet of paper with two other listings, I believe. Anyway, if there's nothing, then there's nothing.
Yes, if I may, I'm looking at the communication that Ms. Alderson is referring to, and they say they have no conditions. There's a little checkbox at the end, no conditions.
It's
of
not
urban
checked off,
forestry.
yeah. It's a little bit confusing because they give you the 3 properties, item 2, 5, and 14.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what I was concerned about. That's all. Thanks, Mr. Taylor, for clarifying.
Yeah. It also says it's item 2. This isn't item 2. Maybe it was item 2 on the last. Yeah, this memo is back in September 2020. So this memo was, again, from the old package when this matter was before the committee back last September. If you look at the date, September 3rd for September 15th hearing. So whether it's still relevant, it was, this notice we're looking at is from the last hearing. That's right, yeah.
So in that case, I have no problem seconding that motion.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Okay, unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Lightbourne.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay, item number 42 is 3 HARTFIELD Road. It's an application for a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. We've had a few of those today. There's 5 variances in the zoning bylaw. This matter was before the committee November 24, 2020. Urban Forestry requesting variances or conditions 2 and 5. Planning is again requesting, I believe, a deferral. This matter was already deferred November 2020. We have 5 variances, a revised site plan. The deferral was to consult with planning. And then they wrote and they said, we've dealt with planning, we request to be put on the agenda, but yet planning is still looking for a deferral, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Carvalino? Oh, no, that's November. Okay. Okay, yeah, please, it's the lawyer from Kagan Shastri. We have dealt with all of your reasons for deferral. Can I place you on the March 23rd? Let me know. And they said yes. So, okay. So the speaker for this application is Peter Del Grosso, the agent, as well as we have 3 neighbors registered to speak, including both adjacent 1 HARTFIELD, 5 HARTFIELD, as well as 1222 Royal York.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, there's been some changes to the speaker list. The last 2 speakers at 5 HARTFIELD and 1222 Royal York will not be with us today.
Okay.
The neighbor from 1 HARTFIELD Road is, and the agent is Mr. Paul DeMello. There was some confusion, but it's not Peter Del Grosso, it's Paul DeMello.
Okay. Okay, Mr. DeMello.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing the application today. Mr. Chair, you correctly identified there are 5 variances. Originally, there were 9 variances, and when we asked for the adjournment in November, it was to revise the plan to eliminate some of the variances which related to the loggia that was at the back of the home.
Okay.
And I'd ask if the moderator could put up the revised site plan dated March 16, 2021, and if I could just walk you through the variances on the ground that might help. Thank you. If you look at the chart at the side, one of the first variance that we're requesting was a lot area coverage variance. The bylaw provides 33 with the reduction of the loggia. And the loggia was at the back of the home where the steps, now you see a deck at the back. The number is 128.58. A loggia extended about 4.5 meters across the entire width of the home into the rear yard. Didn't require rear yard setback, but that's now been removed. That reduces the overall lot area coverage to 34%, whereas the bylaw permits 33%. In terms of the front yard setback, The rest of the house, as a result of the changes, as a result of the removal of the loggia, has not changed. There's a front yard setback that's required of 8.17 meters, which is really to the front porch, but to the actual home itself, it's 8.96 meters. And what we've done is we've taken number 1 Hartfield is a corner lot, but it fronts onto, orients onto, and as a garage onto Hartfield. And then we have number 5. And the average between the two is 11.15 meters. The variance that's being requested is 8.17 meters. In actual fact, what we're doing is moving the house back about 3 feet from the existing setback, which occurs for the existing home, which is at 7.27 meters. The additional variance that was requested is with regards to building depth. The building depth permitted under the bylaw 17 meters. There's been the request here for 21.84 meters. That also was a reduction, was previously 26.5 some odd meters. I can't remember the exact number, but with the removal of the loggia, we removed that additional length. And as you can see, this is a rather long lot. The lot can easily accommodate the additional building depth, particularly given that we haven't got over the lot area coverage. And we still have a rear yard setback of 20.67 meters to the rear of the property. The final variance that was also requested was one of height to a flat roof. The bylaw provides for a maximum permitted height of 6.5 meters, whereas we're requesting 13.06 meters to the flat roof, which is consistent with the neighboring properties. I believe number 5 is at 11 meters, a little over 11 meters, and number 7 at Hartfield is higher than that. We have a grading change at the front of the property, as you can see from the site plan, that changes the elevated grade, changes the average grade significantly from which you do the measurements, and that's what's impacting much of the design here. But the actual size of the home, the actual footprint of the home, and the frontage of the home on the street, we submit is fitting in character, especially particularly given the new builds that are developing within the area. I did want to also identify and leave any time, of course, for questions the committee has. Yeah, address the building depth. Respectfully, none of the variances that we've asked for, sorry, my mistake, there was one further one. There's a main pedestrian entrance height, which is at the front of the house. The bylaw permits 1.2 meters. We've requested 2.83 meters to account for the grading that occurs on the site. And this is for the entrance to the height. And the depiction, it's a reflection of exactly what's happening at number 5, number 7 Hartfield Road because of grading changes on the properties. That's what's required. I would also note, Mr. Chair, in the previous notice that went out, there was a variance notice that was required for the aggregate of side yards, whereas the side yard, the aggregates, the required under the bylaw is 3.2 aggregate, minimum of 1.2 on either side. If you look at the site plan drawing, we actually have 3.21, which is in excess. There's one pinch point that if you look across from number 5 Hartfield, there's 2-story, you'll see there's a marker there of 1.33. That's simply for a basement. There's an underground parking, there's an underground garage, the driveway comes in, that's a turn. That's there, but the actual building itself is all set back at least 1.6 meters along the property line with number 5 Hartfield, save for that minor point. So 3.2, the variance of 2.88 combined aggregate between the left and the right, the east and the west sides was identified, and it seems to have been dropped off. It wasn't identified in a notice of examiner's provision, but I raise it as a point of caution simply because the notice examiner may read that as a required setback of 1.33, and I don't want to have to come back if we can avoid it, to avoid that 1.33 setback, as it's only for the garage. If the moderator can go to the site plan drawings that were previously prepared or submitted back from September, which shows the footprint of the house, I can show you. Thank you. If you
Mr.
could
DeMello,
go-
can you also choose wrap up because you're over 5 minutes?
Yep,
Just try
if
to
you
sum
could
up.
go to the, if you could just go to the next page, it shows the basement.
Mr. Chairman, we only have the revised site plan here in the package.
Mr. Chair, that's fine. That's fine. We don't have to go back. It was in the materials, but that's fine. As I said, the 1.33 relates to the garage basement. The actual above grade, everything above grade will be at the 1.66 or above. And in actual fact, that's a greater setback than the current house that exists on the site now.
Okay.
And respectfully, we believe it meets all 4 tests of the Planning Act, Section 45, and respectfully request that committee approve. I understand there's also a condition request from Urban Forestry with regards to obtaining a permit with regards to tree at the back. We understand that that permit requirement will proceed with that application.
Okay. So we're going to hear from the neighbors now, but before we do that, some of the things you've mentioned, just asking you whether it lends itself to being constructed in accordance as illustrated. Perhaps when you mentioned the front lot line, it's not 8.15 right across. So maybe perhaps we can think about if, in including the side yards, if it's an appropriate situation for it to be tied to the elevation plan or some other plan from the plans to, first of all, deal with that front lot line so you're not getting an approval to go 8.15 all the way across, as you've explained, and the same thing perhaps with some of the other variances. But let's go back. Let's hear from the neighbors, and you'll have a chance to respond. Before we do that, does anyone have any questions for Mr. DeMello? Before you move on to the speakers, we only have one speaker with concern, the neighbor from 1 HARTFIELD.
Danny Benissimo, I don't know if I have a corrupt file here, but I only see a site plan. I don't see any floor plans. Is that correct? I'm looking at my set of drawings and I only see revised site plan dated March 16th. The other members see
Same with
any
me,
other
Danny. Same with
Pardon?
me.
Mr. Bellissimo.
Oh, I just said same with me.
Mr. Bellissimo, that is correct. The package at this point only has that revised site plan. The rest of the plans are not included.
Is that an acceptable application then? Is that what you're saying? That we don't need to look at the other drawings, the elevation, et cetera?
We have the other drawings on file, Mr. Bellissimo. I believe that it was a staff error and therefore not part of the package. We don't know why. We'll have to try to figure that out. But at this point right now, we do have the actual plans. I could put them on the screen if you want to see them.
I'm just asking, I guess my question to staff and the chair is that legitimate? Can we go ahead and approve a proposal where drawings are missing for us to
Well,
look at?
they're not missing. They're not part of our package, but they have been filed with the city, correct?
We do have them, yes. I'm looking at them right now, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's part of it just wasn't reproduced for us, I guess, because of the deferral and was part of the original package. Oh, it's a staff error? Okay. Okay. So can we go on to the neighbors, or do you still want to, is there some issue rising out of these plans? Okay, can we proceed, or let's hear from the neighbors then? First of all, I'll just point out that the letter we have on file that was from 1 HARTFIELD, in fact, is a letter signed by 1 HARTFIELD, 1222 Royal York, 1220 Royal York, and 5 HARTFIELD. So this letter has been signed by all 4 neighbors. Now I'm just trying to see, there's a date on this letter. Oh, it talks about the original application. Okay, so this is a current letter, even though it doesn't have a date on it that I can see. And then there's below that, there's another letter. I don't know if this is part of the same letter because it comes after the 4 signatures. It says test 1, the variance requested is minor, no. And then there's a 1-page letter with 1 picture. I don't know who that's from. You see that? Is that from the same group, the 4 people, or is it something else? So I just throw that out. Maybe the neighbors know. So the one speaker is Elizabeth Zucchiati from One Hartfield, who was one of the first signatory of the letter. So maybe she's the one who actually wrote the letter. But it's been written on behalf of all 4 neighbors who've signed it. So is Mrs. Zucchiati there, please? You with us on the line?
Yes, I'm here. The letter was created by all the neighbors, and unfortunately, due to work conflicts, I was the only one who was able to join the call starting at 2:30 today. So I'm speaking on behalf of everybody who signed the letter. A couple of things. We did not receive the revised plans before the letter had to be submitted, so no plans were provided for us to see. Secondly, they have not shown the tree on the plan. We've mentioned this in both letters now, there's a significant tree in the backyard, a healthy tree. It's significantly larger than the 30 centimeter diameter. So urban forestry needs to look at this tree. In regards to the setback, it's not 8.1 meters. The setback is 17 meters. As well, the pedestrian entrance, there suggests that the bylaw is 1.2 meters and they're proposing 2.83 meters. And in addition to the roof height, it's 6.5 meters and they're proposing 13.06. So they're looking at a significantly bigger house that is already there. And the neighbors and I have very big concerns about the size of the house. It's raising a current single-story house to essentially a 3-story house, 2 stories plus a walkout basement. And that was from the first drawing. So that's already putting the main floor above the neighbor's fences. So the height of the dwelling, the location of the lot near a corner with adjacent lots, tons of windows, and the size of the home is significantly above any of the variances that are established by the city.
So I understand. Are you saying that the variances shown are wrong, or you're just outlining how you're just?
No, they're significantly over what's permitted.
As shown on the zoning notice, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all we received.
Yeah, no, I thought
and then
you were trying,
we had to
I thought
submit
you
our
meaning
letter.
that it's actually
Yeah.
higher than or less than it is, but you mentioned you're just going through and you're saying the coverage is 1% over 8 meters. The distance from the front lot line 11.14 to 8.515, although he did mention it's not consistent across the lot. So to keep him honest, I'm suggesting that if in the event of an approval, it'd be tied to the plan so that it's not, he doesn't make it 8.1 meter for lot line across the entire property. And yeah, so the question is, it's up to the committee to decide if these changes being proposed, for example, the length of 21.84 compared to 17, if that's minor, if it's the prevailing character or not. I thought you were saying that somehow that the city numbers were wrong. And again,
No. City numbers are correct.
Yeah, you're right.
He had said that it was 8 meters. Sorry, my bad.
Okay.
But again, the concern is for this tree that has not been noted on the plans. It was not noted on the first one. There was no acknowledgement of a tree, and we contacted forestry, and they said it wasn't noted on the plan. So
yeah, because it shows
that's a huge concern. They're not showing it.
Yeah, this report refers to the city-owned tree at the front, but it doesn't refer to the large tree you're mentioning at the back. And I think someone mentioned that
correct,
it's a big tree, and people realized that they couldn't build without damaging or destroying that tree. So we'll hear what the applicant has to say about what he knows about that backyard tree, because the city, urban forestry does not just concern themselves with city trees, but as well with private trees. So your position on that of the other signatories to your letter is that this is inappropriate development.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now we're going to give Mr. DeMello a chance to reply to your concerns, and then we're going to take it into committee for a decision. In the meantime, does any of the committee members have any questions for the neighbor at 1 Hartfield?
Danny Bellissimo has a question. I was confused. I couldn't hear you clearly. Did you say that you did see the drawings, like the floor plans and elevations on the website?
Sorry, Mr. Bellissimo, sorry. We do have them. The ones that I had up on the screen, because I had a different set open. I can open them now for you right now. So
No,
these.
it's okay. I was asking the applicant. I thought we're having questions of the opposition of the resident. I was just asking her if she had seen the drawings, because I don't have drawings, and I would abstain from voting on this one because I can't vote without seeing plans and elevations or sections. I just wanted to know if the person who just presented had seen all the elevations, plans, sections, etc.
We received the original one, but the other one was not available to us prior to when we had to submit the letter.
So what you're saying is you're not reacting to the proposal then, because you can't see it either.
The only thing we received was the public hearing notice mailed on Friday, March 12th, with the 5 new zoning bylaws on the variances. And that was it. There was no plans.
Stop.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, and as I said, to inform the chair, I would not be voting. I'll be abstaining from voting on this one.
That's your right, Mr. Bellissimo. That's fine.
Thank you.
Any of the members have any other questions for this neighbor before we go back to Mr. DeMello for his rebuttal? Staff has explained that we do have the plans, correct? And you put them on, but they just weren't put in with the file. The application is a complete application. We do have the plans. If you choose you don't want to vote, that's your prerogative. So let's go back to Mr. DeMello. Mr. DeMello, can you mention in your rebuttal what you know about this hundreds-of-year-old tree in the backyard that doesn't seem to be identified by urban forestry? The report we have deals with the city tree in the front, but not with the large tree. It says massive, several hundred-year-old tree on the property where the enlarged house is planned. Well, it's a new house.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I just want to confirm you can hear me. I was having problems with my mic.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If I could have the revised site plan put up again, I can identify where the tree is that I understand is the tree that the neighbors have been speaking to. Thank you. And if you look at the back of the corner of the building, it's across from lot 94. There's a tree at the back there with a diameter caliper of 1.5.
1.5 what?
It's just 1.5. I think that's 1.5 meters. The diameter caliper of the other trees are identified like 0.02.
Yeah.
It's diameter caliper 1.5, and it's an indication of a tree right there.
Okay, so it's certainly bigger
near
than
the
30
side of the building.
So you would agree it's a massive, several hundred-year-old tree as identified on the neighbor's letter.
I couldn't speak to it being several hundred years old or the age of the tree or condition of the tree, but it definitely is a bylaw regulated tree. That's why the urban forestry has imposed a condition, and we're happy to address that condition. Recognizing that the condition, before we can build, we would need to have a permit with regard to the removal of the tree or the injury of the tree. And as part of the city's process, if the city were prepared to grant a permit with regard to that, there'd be compensation. There's significant room in the back of the yard for planting because of the excess backyard, including contributions towards urban forestry throughout the city. So we're aware of that tree and condition. No one's trying to avoid that. We recognize the appropriateness of condition.
But you have to jump through the hoops to deal with this tree. You know about the tree, you bought it.
Exactly.
Or your client bought it. Staff's just asking, can you confirm that other than the change to loggia, there's been no other changes to this application?
There has been no other change. There has been no other changes other than the removal of the loggia in the back, which removed the additional lot area, additional depth, And there was also a second deck at the back on the top of the loggia that's been removed as a result.
Okay. Okay. And again,
And Mr. Chair, further to your comment about whether we'd be prepared to tie the approval to these drawings as approved, during the break, I spoke to my clients. They're totally content and satisfied with that. So we would have the drawings that were originally submitted, I think it was September of 2020, prior to committee, the original drawings. The only revision would be the site plan would replace that drawing, which now shows the setbacks as proposed. Because I understand your concern that if there is an approval for an 8.17, that we don't extend the house out forward the entirety of the area. So it would be built substantially in conformity with the drawings to be attached.
yeah, what they're calling it now is constructed as illustrated on the blank document as relates to blank. So whether it's the site plan as relates to front yard setback, correct? That's what you want to say?
That's correct.
I'm trying to keep you honest on the front yard setback. I don't believe on the, what about the side yards? Again, do they jog also, the side yards? So maybe
The side,
respect to the side yards is also shown on the site plan.
I'm more than content to have it that way as well, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'm just asking if it's the members can put that as part of the motion, but to see that, as you say, because there's jogs or whatever, it makes sense to do that. There are no.
Yeah, the only issue I raised about the side yard was because the 1.33 with the basement. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, so any questions for the agent or for the neighbor for that matter, and take it into committee for decision? Any residual questions, or is someone ready to make a motion? And again, I was wrong at the outset. Planning is not asking for another deferral or anything. It was just, we pulled up the other one.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm ready to make a motion on this.
Thank you.
I'm strongly influenced by a couple of aspects associated with this application. The lot coverage is proposed as marginally larger than that proposed or prescribed by current zoning, 1%. The height, I believe, is really exaggerated due to the fact that the garage entry point grade is much lower than the street. I also find that the house, as I see it, very similar to the recently constructed house at number 7, 2 doors away. So I find the variances meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I would move approval subject to urban forestry condition number 2, and also that the construction occur in accordance with the side yards and front yards as shown on the site plan that has been filed with the city.
Okay, so you gotta configure it, what the date of the site plan on file and. Okay. Okay, thank you for that motion, Mr. Taylor. Do we have a seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion?
I'm prepared to second that motion. However, with regard to the tree in the backyard that was identified, so that is on record now for urban forestry to take a look at that as well, and maybe, I don't know if there's a condition we can add to that, but just acknowledging that tree is there.
Yeah, well, they've asked for their condition, and Mr. Taylor has made that part of his motion.
Oh, sorry. In addition to the one in the backyard?
That is,
yeah, 1 and 2.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Yep. Then I'm prepared to second as well.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? So Mr. Bellissimo, you're going to abstain, right? Okay, so the motion carries 4 with 1 abstention. Okay, thank you, Mr. DeMello. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of committee. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next application, item number 43, 52 13th Street. It's an application to construct a new detached dwelling. There are two variances. This matter was before the committee December 3rd, 2020, at which time was deferred to revise the application. There was 4 variances, and now there are now 2 variances. Number 48 is still vigorously opposed. We have their letter. In the late arriving materials, we have a planning report recommending refusal of variance 1, re 47 Burnham Thorpe. December 4, 2020. I didn't understand that. I put a bunch of question marks. So perhaps we can hear about that from the agent. And the agent on this application is Hamia Aga Bodhi, who is the owner. And as well, we have neighbors from 48, 50, and 52 13th Street. Actually, 52 is actually the
52.
owner, Douglas Nixon.
The owner,
That's not a
right.
mistake, or is that the owner?
That's the owner.
That's the owner, okay.
Hamia.
Not according to the names on the application, but...
No, Douglas is not the owner.
Is Douglas Nixon the owner, or?
No.
So we have a wrong address that says he resides at 52, which is the subject property. So perhaps someone can look into that while we hear from the agent to clarify. Sorry, the owner. Is Hamia there?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. My name is Hamia Al-Mibadi.
Yeah, can you try talking a little closer to the microphone? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yes. Is it better now?
Much better, sir.
Perfect. Again, my name is Hamia Al-Mibadi, owner of 52 13th Street. Regarding the planner's letter that you have that question mark, that was the wrong letter. That was report for another property, so it was submitted by mistake for us last time. That was the reason we deferred, so we get the right report, the correct report. Since then, we talked to the planners. We had back and forth communication with them to satisfy their requirements. We reduced the GFA from 91 to 82, which planners were happy with. And then based on our neighbor requirement, we got rid of the parking in the backyard. We moved it to the front. We had to move the building a bit toward back so we could accommodate the front parking. That's why we got the second variance, the new one, regarding the building depth.
Okay, so you've made some changes. You had 4 variances. You now have 2. You lowered the GFA from 0.89 to 0.81, I believe. Where is that?
0.82.
Okay, your neighbor, the neighbor says he remains vigorously opposed to the variances, and they graciously agreed to a deferral to give them an opportunity to present a more appropriate plan. And they say essentially it's the same proposal. So I don't know if this gentleman is going to be speaking. I guess he is, Mr. Volk. So you've outlined the changes you made. Planning is no longer opposed. We do have I didn't mention, we have a forestry condition 2 items on this one, 2 and 5.
Correct.
So this report I referred to was a mistake. It was in the previous package, and it was...
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the property owner before we go back and we go and hear from the neighbors?
Danny Belisma has a question.
Go ahead, sir.
The applicant, I noticed your second floor, you have a section 4 meters by 2.654, which is void.
Yes.
So that area is an interior 2-story area. I'm assuming that is excluded from your gross floor area calculation. Is that correct?
Up to just 10 meters of that, it is. The rest is not.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
up to, so based on the zoning bylaw, up to just 10 meter of that can be excluded. The rest of that would be included.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
Okay, if there's no other questions, let's hear from Mr. Volk at 48 13th. Or, yeah.
Sorry,
Mr. Volk, we have your letter.
Sorry, one moment, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to unmute them.
Okay.
But the system is frozen. Just if you can bear with me for 1 minute. Okay, so the system is unfrozen now. Let me try. Okay, I've unmuted Mr. Alan Volk.
Hello, Alan Volk speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, committee members. So back in the last committee meeting, the owner of 52 13th Street presented a plan for a building with a 9.6 meter height with a flat roof and skylights up on the flat roof. And I don't know, I don't understand why that isn't shouldn't be put in as a variance again this time. You know, the last time the planning was recommending denial of this plan, and he's come back with essentially the same plan. He moved the parking from the back to the front. He's got the same overheight building. It looks like 4 levels of living space. It looks to me like it would be divided into apartments. I don't know. It's got 3 separate entrances, and it's completely inappropriate with the surrounding 1-story bungalows. And it's a very small, it's probably one of the smallest lots on the street. The existing brick building there is 17 feet wide, the existing house. And according to his plan, he's going to, and that's right up against a mutual driveway at number 50. And according to his plan, he's giving himself an extra, looks like an extra 2 feet into that mutual right of way. So I don't know what's going on with these measurements, and it looks like the same proposal as last time. From my point of view, nothing changed.
So he had, I don't have a copy of the previous application in our package, the previous notice, but I believe we had I had made note here about 4 variances, and now there's 2 variances, and he did mention he brought down the, the depth is pretty minor at 0.35, a third of a meter over what's required for the depth. But the floor space index, 0.6 is permitted. He's come down to 0.82 times the lot at 202 square meters from 0.89 it was before, or 0.9, I don't know what it was before. Perhaps staff can find out. Staff? What was the previous floor space index? So he has reduced that, and the other 2 variances aren't here anymore. So it's not exactly the same. It may not be enough of what you...
I know, but...
Yeah, he's mentioned that the...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But he submitted a drawing with exactly the same building height with a flat roof at 9.6 meters. That he sent them to me personally. Okay. So I don't that's in contravention of the height bylaw right there.
Yeah, because what's before us right now, Mr. Volk, just shows a depth variance of third of a meter and a floor space index that now at 8.82, which he says community planning is happy with. They haven't weighed in, but he did reduce it from what it was previously.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the previous public hearing notice that was mailed on November 23rd, 2020 shows a floor space index of 0.91 times.
Okay, now he's at 0.82, which
That's
is how
right.
many square meters is 9.9?
That was 225.49 square meters.
So he's come down 23 square meters, and there was 4 variances in total, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
What has he eliminated?
So the first public hearing notice had the floor space index. It had maximum permitted height of all side exterior main walls.
What was that variance? Okay, so that doesn't appear anymore. So the neighbor raises a good question. What happened to that? How did the design change that variance disappeared? And what's the 4th variance? The other one that's disappeared. Yeah, that's not there anymore either. So the platform's at least gone on the variance list. The height variance is gone. So we have to ask the applicant, how did that happen? Because the neighbor is saying, I have more or less the same plans. So yeah, Mr. Volk, so that's all we have before us here is he's come down on the floor space index by 20
Okay.
square meters. So where's
Sorry, did he provide any elevation drawings
so because we
to the
don't have-
committee? Has he provided elevation?
Yeah, we don't have a height variance in front of us, at least in this app, unless I'm looking.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have the original plans and the revised plans, and the revised plans also have the elevations, and all of that is available on AIC.
Okay, does the revised plans have a height variance? Because it's not showing on our list of variances. We only got 2 variances now. We don't have the deck at all. We don't have a deck variance. Maybe there's still a deck, but it complies. And we have, we don't have a height variance. So what happened to the height variance of 2 meters or more? Oh, it was a sidewall height. So what happened to the sidewall heights? We'll have to hear from the agent as to whether that was removed. And there is no length variance before us. This depth 0.35 a meter.
And the platform variances that were requested before, the number of platform variances is also deleted from the new notice.
Right, so like I said, all we have before us is FSI of 0.82 and a depth of 0.35 of a meter over what's required. But we don't have the main wall height. So we'll have to hear from the agent in rebuttal about that, sir. Okay? Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Volk, who is the author of the letter, before we move on to the next speaker? Okay, so the next speaker, Mr. Nixon, what's his address?
Mr. Chairman, Douglas Nixon's address, I believe, is 35 13th Street. If that's incorrect, he can
Okay.
make a correction.
Good segue. Mr. Nixon, welcome.
Mr. Nixon is unmuted, sir.
Well, okay, so while we're waiting for Mr. Nixon, there's the other speaker right next door at 50 30th 13th Street. Maybe she knows where Mr. Nixon lives. But we'll try to find him, Mr. Nixon. But why don't we go to Louise Graham now from 50?
Louise Graham was, Mr. Chairman, apologies. Louise Graham was on the line. She's no longer on the line.
Okay.
And I don't have any more other anonymous. Yeah, I don't know where she went.
And Mr. Nixon, you unmuted him, but he's not responding.
Okay, hello. Can you unmute me?
Yes. Mr. Nixon?
Can you hear me? Yes, that's me. Thank you. 35 13th Street.
Oh, you're 35. Okay.
No, I'm
yeah, they had you
okay.
on our list as that you lived at 52, but you're at 35.
Correct.
Okay, so let us know what your concerns are with this revised application.
Well, my concern is the narrowness of the lot. I'm glad that the parking has been moved to the front, but that just creates congestion in the front. It seems like it's quite high, and it's not going to be representative of the neighborhood in regards to its just how much space is in it, and it does kind of look like it's broken into. It can be easily broken into 3 different accommodations, which we're in a college area, and people would try to do this. It's advantageous that way. So that's mainly my concern. I'm surprised 50, which is right beside there, isn't on. She maybe, this took a while, but she's got a lot to lose with the laneway issue. I can't see how all that's going to fit in. So that's my 2 cents. So I'm opposed, whatever that counts for.
Okay, Mr. Nixon, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Nixon at 35 before we move on to see if we can find Louise Graham at 50? Okay, so do we have Louise Graham? Can we try to find her?
Mr. Chairman, there might be a call-in user. That is, we have a new one.
Hello.
Hi, Louise
Hello?
Graham.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, Louise Graham. Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Oh, okay, she can hear us. Great. We can hear her too.
Okay. Hello. Okay. So Louise Graham. After trying to understand the plans as well as I could, I wanted to say I have a concern and I have a bit of a question. My concern for me was the second floor balcony. I wanted to ensure that there was a complete privacy wall so that both our respectful privacy would be accommodated. And the next thing was that I was very grateful for the new plan showing that there was no rear parking and it would be front pad parking.
Okay. So do you continue to have concerns now that there's only 2 variances and he's brought down the floor space index to 0.82 from 0.91, or do you still have concerns?
No, I don't at this point, because from what I could understand through the plans and through investigation, I guess I saw it like, I know I'm going to lose sky and sun. I really appreciated the fact that it looked like a home and not a future rooming house, which is not a problem in some places, but it wouldn't really suit this situation. But the fact that I was supportive of the front pad parking, because most of the area has that here. I did have concerns with losing sky and sun, but it is a very narrow lot. I would, love it had been a bigger lot and more things could be done. But the balcony on the second floor was a concern for me regarding I wanted a solid wall so that both our sides' privacy would be respected. But based on what I've tried to understand, some of what I'm hearing does kind of confuse me a little bit more than I thought, because I only had what was given to me. However, what I was coming to you today was to be supportive of the front parking pad, and I shared pictures of you for you to realize that it was there. And just to make certain that the balcony in the rear would be solid so they couldn't have access to just look over at my side.
So
And
you're talking about what they used to opaque screening on the sides. I don't know if it's the east or west, like this one on your side.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
Do you have a second floor balcony? Do you have a second floor terrace balcony on your property or no?
No, I just have a deck.
Okay.
So, they would be looking down onto me. And so I would just like a solid wall to say, they're going to peek out. They're going to be peeking out the front.
Right. I think, I don't know about Mr. Carvalina, a solid wall, does that mean like opaque screening, or they put up a screen? I don't like.
No, I don't want screening if I can. I would like more of a solid wall, or very just a wall there so they can't see over on my side if I'm in the back.
Yeah, you're concerned with overlook and privacy, but.
Right. That was one of my, that was the concern. I mean, I did have concern with height, but in the same breath, I mean, he has a narrow lot. I don't know what else he could do. As long as it doesn't become, this new plan doesn't indicate the same as it did in the original, that it looked like there was going to be like 7 apartments in there. Now it's a 3-bedroom residential home designated as such.
Yep. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Graham?
Yeah, Mrs. Graham, can you just tell me where you live?
Right next door.
5013th. And who was that asked me?
Mrs.
Don Taylor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back to the agent to respond to those concerns. And the first thing I want to hear about is whether we still have a height variance. What happened to that over 2 meter height variance that was on part of the last main wall height? Actually, that was what it was. Because it's not before us. All that's before us is the forest place index and the small length.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. Should I start with your question or just go one by one?
Whatever you want to do, sir.
Okay. So regarding the balcony on the backyard, although it's not in our variance, but we will make that solid. We will make sure that's the way our neighbor wanted. That's not a problem. Right now we have the screen it's not solid screen, we can change that to solid screen. That should be fine. As I mentioned, the main reason for the second variance was because our neighbor wanted to move the back parking, like the parking on the backyard, to the front because of the mutual driveway. So I understand the other neighbor asking, like, well, he's happy that we moved it, but at the same time he has problem with the conjunction. I don't know how to answer that. It's at the end of the day, there should be a parking there. So there will be a car, but we moved it to the front for the sake of our neighbor. Regarding the questions the other neighbor has, I sent, as he mentioned, I sent him the letter. I tried to talk to him 2 times. Unfortunately, he was at work. I went one weekend, I couldn't find him. I talked to his wife. So we got rid of the second floor rooftop balcony because it was his concern and their concern for the overlook. And to my understanding, while with that having on the second floor, we had the main wall height as well. So we got rid of that. We have this part of the wall, apparently based on our zoning examiner, that can be within the 40% of the wall that can exceed the height. I to be honest, I can't talk for her, but with getting rid of that part and reducing the opening toward our neighbors, at the same time getting rid of the balcony, we could reduce our technically the zoning problems to just density and that building length. So is there any question that I missed?
It's up to you as what you respond. Does committee members have any further questions for the agent? Or for any of the neighbors for that matter? Or is someone ready to?
Danny Benesmo has some technical questions for the agent. If staff can put up the drawing that says proposed south elevation. Thank you. That's the one. Now, I was reading earlier on that the one of the earlier planning reports indicated that the main wall height limit is 7 meters, and in this drawing you're showing it as 7.1. You're aware of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because I saw 7 meters in other elevations, so I wasn't sure which number.
Oh,
was
you mean this? No, 7 meters is correct. That 7.1 is wrong. Actually, we can change that. It should be 7 meters.
So
Sorry.
there's a contradiction and a conflict in some other drawings. I just wanted to point that out to you. And then talking about main walls, a bit of an education for us all. This is the main wall we're looking at. Is that correct?
The main wall we are looking at is this one and the other elevation, all of it, direct.
Right, but this one here, if you draw a horizontal line at the main wall height, that's 7 meters. The other part above that is not part of the main wall. Is that correct?
Correct. That's a part of roof.
So the ruling is that because it's under 40%, then according to your calculations, 7 meters is the height of the main wall and not the height to the roof where the flat roof is, and that we have the skylights. That's correct, right?
Correct.
So that variance has been removed because of that interpretation. I just wanted to clarify that.
I think that's the reason. So technically, as I said, in a back and forth we had with the planners and the zoning department, we tried to satisfy, like technically we had 3 times of revision of the whole drawing to make sure we meet their requirements. They asked us to move the walk up to the backside. We tried, we got rid of the balcony. So all these changes was based on their recommendation, and each step they would get rid of one of the zoning notices.
Good. I just wanted to clarify that, because when you go for permit, because the 7 meter variance doesn't exist, you need to make those changes. I want to raise one more question, maybe a technical question. The drawing roof, if staff can put the roof drawing on, it's 1. Okay, that's the one. To the applicant again, top left corner, it says balcony. That's.
This is
an
not
oversight.
there. No, it's
That's
not
an
there.
oversight.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, I just couldn't figure out how that was a balcony. Okay.
exactly.
So that will
That-
also be removed. Thank you.
Yeah.
But
Sorry,
I
well,
suppose they're
sorry,
clarification questions.
Sorry, Danny, what
Yeah,
was that?
that's
It's
what-
being, did he say it's being removed? What's being removed?
He's saying that the word balcony should not have been there.
I see.
Yeah, that's where the balcony was before,
Okay.
and that was one of the reasons we
Okay,
had.
so you will update that as well. So we're not approving this balcony.
No,
drawing.
there is no balcony.
So we don't have to,
Correct.
Thank you.
he doesn't have to change that or change the other one from 7.1, Danny, or he's not. gonna
I
have
don't think we need to
problems?
change it because I've seen in some of the elevation, he does say 7 meters and some are 7.1.
Right.
So because it's not a variation that we're going to be approving, he would have to stay under the 7 meter or no,
sure.
no higher.
Right.
So he'll be refused
Correct.
when he takes the
Great,
permit.
thank you.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, any further questions for the agent or the neighbors, or is someone ready for a motion? And we do have on this one, urban forestry 2 and 5.
Danny Bellissimo is ready to make a motion if no one else has any further questions.
Yes. Go ahead, Danny.
So I find that the variances are minor in nature. I find that the applicant has gone a long way in making revisions. And I would like to move approval of variances conditional on the forestry conditions. I believe that's all there is in terms of conditions.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. A seconder for Mr. Bellissimo's motion. Ms. Alderson, I see your hand up. All in favor? You have unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Agemo Body. Wanted to try that. Hope I got it right. Okay, thank you very much.
That was right.
And matter is approved unanimously. Okay, so our next application is item number 44. 21 Victor Avenue. It's an application was deferred from January 21, 2021. It's to construct a second and third story rear addition. There are 3 variances. Right, we have 3D and other images that the agent wishes to refer to during the hearing, during their presentation. We have a letter dated February 22nd to the neighbors. This is after, I guess it was adjourned, a copy of a letter to the neighbors from the applicant. And we have 23 and 27 Victor opposed. Okay, and there's no urban forestry or other conditions. The speaker on this application is Stephen Kanjar, and as well as we have the 2 neighbors who wrote in with in opposition, 23 and 27. So, Mr. Kanjar, welcome.
Hello, good afternoon, committee. Can you hear me?
Yes, so this matter was deferred when it was here, January 21st. You don't have a note here as to what that was deferred for? And have you made changes?
Yeah, yes, of course we made changes. One of the reasons it was deferred is just to let you, just as a quick recap, I was a new agent on this file, brought in just late in the game. I kind of saw that there was issues with the original application, and I asked for a deferment based on the fact that we could consult with community planning, the neighbors, and also propose changes, and that's why we're here today.
Yep.
As you know, as you can see, we do have some variances. We've modified all our variances and reduced most of them. We've consulted with planning and followed their guidelines as well. We reduced our wall heights, our FSI. We eliminated the side yard shed, which eliminated 2 of the variances, and we're keeping the existing building height as is, which is in line with the existing home. I understand. We also reached out to the neighbors. We've sent them emails, letters. The owners actually reached out to the neighbors as well. I think it's an important fact to also just mention that, unfortunately, we haven't heard any feedback from the neighbors, specifically 23, prior to this hearing. So I was just going on assumption based on what her concerns were, which I'm assuming would be light and also be light and views per se. And then recently I submitted a diagram dated March 22nd there, which kind of shows the massing and scaling of the proposal. I understand her main objective, I believe, is again light and view. Based on the east-west trajectory of the sun and how it rises and falls, that'll give you a quick synopsis of the scaling of what's proposed. Number 23 also has an enclosed, fairly large sunroom veranda to the rear on the right side, furthest away from our addition. Now, if the moderator can also go to the site plan, which is A0. On that site plan, based on the east-west direction, you can kind of see how the sunlight and as the sun rises, there may be a bit of impact with sunlight, but I believe it's kind of, I don't think it's going to be as significant as the neighbor at 23 feels. As that sun is at high noon, for example, it's going to be shining down right into that little separation between our addition and her furthest veranda to the right-hand side there. Again, we reached out to the neighbors. We haven't heard any feedback aside from the objection letter that I was just made aware of, which was filed recently. So it's hard to work with neighbors when we don't hear any feedback from them. So I did my best in terms of trying to accommodate her needs. We did reduce all the variances based on planning's recommendations. I believe the house in its nature is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. We have a long, skinny lot. We're not building out any further to the rear. The front's remaining the same. The character of the neighborhood's remaining the same. And I hope that committee can recognize and appreciate our attempt to try to minimize as much as possible with the variances that we had, without actually having feedback from our neighbors, unfortunately. I hope that you can understand the attempt here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kanjar, for that presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kanjar before we go on to hear from the neighbors? And
I just have a comment. If I might. I honestly have to say that was probably the best form letter of support I've ever seen written. So I just wanted to
sorry, Miss, you're cutting out there. You want to repeat that, Laura? I couldn't hear you cut out. That is the best.
Sorry, form letter of support that I've ever seen in an application. So I just wanted to commend the applicant for that, reaching out to the neighborhood.
Oh, I see. Like the it doesn't just say we support without any details. So it's a very clear letter of what they're supporting.
Very personable. Yes.
Yeah.
Can I also make one comment? We also have 7 letters of support from the past application, and they're in support of this application as well. So we have a vast number of people in support. I do believe the neighbor at 27, her concerns, I understand her concerns, though they probably reflect greatly what 23's concerns are, but I don't believe she's impacted at all by our application as well.
Okay, and Ms. Laura, I just realized what you're talking about. It's the applicant's letter to their neighbors that was so well done, and then they sign off at the bottom. Hi, hello, neighbor, we're your neighbors. It's signed by the 5-year-old. I agree, it's a great letter, but
it's a great letter.
All of this, and Mr.
And I wanted to commend them for that. That's all.
Okay, but notwithstanding this letter, and what Mr. Kanjar said that he's reached out to the neighbors, we read in the opposition letters that they're not working with the community. They're doing what they want. So there's a bit of a disconnect here because we've heard from Mr. Kanjar that he's reached out to the neighbors. He's dropped off plans. We see the letter that you remarked on, which is a beautiful welcome, neighbor to neighbor letter. And yet the opposition are saying in their letter that there's been no communication, no consultation, no real change. So anyway, we have, I guess, one other we can go now and hear from those 2 speakers and perhaps ask them why they, what they're still concerned with. and expand on what they put out in their letter. So the first speaker then is Caroline Kiska at 23 right next door. And we have Caroline's current letter. Not always try to check if it was a letter from the previous application. And actually this particular letter is, okay, the letter from Caroline Kiska appears to be an old letter. She's now sent an email, I guess. No, that was again back in January. I'm just trying to see current as opposed to old letters. So anyway, let's hear from Caroline Kiska, and she'll let us know what her position is currently.
Hi there.
Hello.
This is Caroline Kiska. I'm the neighbor on the north.
Yep.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very loud and clear. You're
Hi.
coming in very
Okay, so I'm the neighbor on the north.
Yes.
And so I'm listening to this, and as you can see, the revised drawings have not changed in any way. And I just want to say that I'm glad that you enjoyed the letter that the Jure de Warren sent out, you know, but I found that letter to be very manipulative because a lot of people that signed that letter to support them, I mean, I would have signed it as well if the bill did not impact me. So I just have to make note of that a lot of these form letters, they're not really letters of support. And I want to also say that I did submit
the committee
another.
the committee does realize that the most affected neighbors and most applications are the two adjacent neighbors, or the neighbor in the rear, neighbor right in front. Other people from down the street, they can sign anything because they don't want to, you know. We realize that. We realize that if they were down the street.
So I also want to say that the neighbor on the south, she's expressed to me that she has the same concerns that I do, but she's at a different point in her life that she's not prepared to sit here for a few hours to argue her point.
No.
So be that as it may, Mr. Kanjar did reach out to me, and he did inform me, as I said in my letter, my most recent letter, that I don't have any concerns about light because I won't be impacted. And also I want to say that he spelled the names of his clients incorrectly. So between the patronizing tone and you know, just the overall, like, I'm glad that they got rid of the shed, but that really helps them more than it helps me. So as regards this 3-story build, they want to build 2 additional stories on top of an existing addition. Now that addition, as I put in my last letter, was meant to have a 2nd-story balcony that never came to be. So there is a door that leads to nowhere on top of this flat roof. This original addition that they want to build on top of is about 1/3 the depth of the original house. So, you know, I thought that maybe a 2nd story would have been staggered and that maybe the 3rd story would be eliminated since they were so high in terms of height. But you know, this 2nd application hasn't really adjusted anything. So I just wonder if Mr. Kanjar can speak to that.
Okay.
Because all of that will affect light. And also, the current addition being so deep has a very, very large deck attached, surrounded by lattice, which is very lovely. But the overall effect is that it's quite massive. So to add another 2 stories onto a house, which is not a small house, it's a decent sized house for the city of Toronto, will just put another stucco wall or board and batten that's going to extinguish the light that goes into my 2nd story. The light coming into my 1st story was already affected because of the 1st addition. But you know, it's still, you know, light has a way to get through trees and over top of buildings. But once you add 2 stories, then that's a whole other matter.
Okay. So we'll have Mr. Kanjar deal with that in his rebuttal. I just want to let you know that it looks like, yeah, take the concerns, carefully disappoint. So community planning, looks like there's a memo here. You know, community planning was originally opposed to 2 of the variances. One of them refused back last January. And we now have, they reschedule it because they say they made changes to the satisfaction of community planning. So you say they made no changes. It appears that community planning is satisfied with whatever changes they have made. but let's
Well, I'm
hear-
not sure how they can be satisfied. The height is the same. The side height has gone down by 1 foot. And then the floor index space is roughly the same. Like, no, it's inconsequential. And I really feel that that third story should be eliminated.
Okay. Okay, so we'll hear from the agent in reply. We're going to hear from the other neighbor. But yes, when they rescheduled the motion back in February 3rd, it said, community planning is okay with this application being scheduled. They have made changes to community planning satisfaction, signed by the planner. So anyway, let's hear from the other neighbor. And before we do that, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Kiska at 23 next door? Okay, so let's hear from Louisa Bobick at 27, Victor.
Hi there. So my concerns are the same as Caroline in terms of like the light that's going to be allowed in and what's going to be blocked. We know our backyard, we have like a whole breakfast nook that we've just completed to optimize all that light that gets brought in, and pushing out the back is going to be a obstruction to that. And I do have to echo Caroline's statement as well in terms of these neighbors have not tried to get in contact with my husband or I. They have not tried to email us, not tried to phone us. They've dropped off these letters that, you know, look nice in the middle of the night, so no one can actually like try and talk to these people even from a socially safe distance. So I don't really feel like they're trying to work with the community that well in that aspect. So I kind of don't agree with their planner statements at all, saying they've tried to work with us or contact us, because they haven't. You know, we really love HUD and think that, you know, the FSI going up for this lot size is too big. There's other houses in the neighborhood that have a third story, but their lots can like accommodate for it. This lot cannot.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bobick. Does anyone have any questions for the neighbor? You're on the couple of doors down.
I'm just north of Caroline, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay, any questions? Or if not, we'll go back to Mr. Kanjar for his response. Okay, Mr. Kanjar?
Hi, how are you? Hi, can you just upload the drawing for A6 for the moderator? I don't know if that's possible. I'd also like to mention that both these applicants, or both these neighbors, both admitted that we reached out to them. Those letters had addresses, emails, phone calls, direct cell numbers to the owners. With COVID, I doubt they'd want to speak to us face to face. They had every opportunity to call us, email us, raise any concerns. We have not heard one beep from them until now. But just to continue on this pretense, you can see through this diagram, we actually brought in those side walls to the third floor. Under this current zoning bylaw, there's nothing prohibiting us from having a third floor. We do currently have a third floor. Our owners are currently somewhat tall, so they need some headroom height. But we did bring in those side walls where the wing walls are for the roof. And when we also lowered the pitch of that third floor roof just to try to afford as much possible light to the neighbors, especially 23, because I knew she would be the most affected. 27, I can't see how she's affected at all with this application. She's so far away, but I understand 23's concerns. She also has a veranda herself, and I believe the way the light trajectory angles into her space, she may lose a little bit of light, but you know, at the end of the day, we can't satisfy everybody, but we did our best in terms of reaching out to the public and the community. We have not heard back from them. So I could only work as much as I could in terms of presenting what I could before you now.
Okay. Anyone have any follow-up questions for either Mr. Kanjar or the neighbors, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
Danny Bellissimo has questions for the applicant. If staff can put up the third floor plan at A 3.1. Okay, that's the one. You can zoom in a little bit to show the two side walls. Thank you. Question for the applicant. You don't state this, but I'm trying to interpret it architecturally. I believe the existing third floor has what we call knee walls. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so that
And those walls are all shaded in that are existing.
right. So basically, if you look at the actual headroom, it's that floor minus the knee walls because that's the character of the existing. And I believe that you've continued that character in the addition, in the washroom suites, where it's all, again, you could have gone straight up, but you went with knee walls as well.
Yes, we had to try to work. That space is a triangular space, and as the closer you get to those knee walls, which are only like almost 18 inches, we built outs there just to try to gain more headroom as you're in that triangular space.
Right. Okay. Thank you. What I'm glad that you included furnishings in this design proposal. Many times we don't get the furniture in the design and we have a hard time understanding the scale of the space. But because you've done that, I could see that basically you're making good use of what you've got, and that you haven't overextended, in my mind, the character of the house. And I would like to make a motion if other members do not have any question, but I'll rest at this point.
Okay, everyone good? Mr. Bellissimo, I think you can proceed and no one else has any questions before Mr. Bellissimo leaves him.
I don't believe there are any conditions. Is that correct as well, Mr. Chair?
That's believed to be correct. No conditions.
Okay. So I find that the variances are minor in nature, that the applicant and the homeowner tried to keep the character of the house as much as possible, and the need for the third floor is obviously required for the family. And I don't find it as imposing because they've made setbacks to the roof lines and included the knee walls. So I move approval for the variances before us. I believe there are 3 of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. We have a seconder for Mr. Bellissimo's motion.
I'm happy to second it. I just wanted to make note that 19 Victor Avenue signed a letter of support, and that is their immediate neighbor, FYI.
Okay.
So I'm going to second that, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Alderson. All in favor? It's been unanimously approved. Thank you, neighbors, and thank you, Mr. Kinzer.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next application is another application that was adjourned or was deferred at the last hearing, I believe. And I believe the reason for the deferral is the proposal and plans have changed since the initial submission. That was Mark McConville, planner. It looks like the planner is now Mr. Flynn. He'll be only a representative of the owner speaking. And I see we have several, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speakers, including the adjacent neighbor at 10 and at 6. We also have a speaker at 12 and then a lawyer representing them. So we can only have 1 speaker from each property. So Mr. Calvano will have to decide whether he wants to present or whether he wants his solicitor, Mr. Ruddick at Loopster Nixon LLP, to represent him and make a presentation. But they can consider that while we hear from Mr. Flynn.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt. This is that special. This is the one where Mark McConville will in fact be presenting, but Mr. Flynn will be rebutting.
Okay.
That I mentioned earlier. And I did speak with Mr. Calvano. His solicitor will speak instead of him. But in the event that there's a technical problem and he can't speak, then Tony will speak for himself. We also have an additional speaker, Mark Rebello from 1 Edge Valley Drive.
1 Edge Valley. Okay, not noticed on the sheet. Okay, so this is a application to construct a new detached dwelling with an attached garage. There are 12 variances. It was put off. We'd like to hear what happened since the last application when they stated they were deferring to make changes. We'd like to hear what changes they made. We have a shadow study. We have an arborist report. We have supporting materials from the owner. We have planning with 2 conditions of approval in the event of approval. We have neighbors opposed, 8 neighbors opposed. 3, 11, 12, 27, 50. And I note that, interesting, 3 of the neighbors all have the same last name, so I guess they all live close to one another, but that's not an issue. They're entitled to make their presentation. And in the late arriving materials, we've been given some additional material, a bird's eye view with notations on it. And we also have a formal letter from Loopstra Nixton, another solicitor there, Mark Joblin, whereas Brendan Rudick is speaking. We have 2 copies of the letter, or actually a long 5-page letter, as well as then comments from another 5 pages of comments from Mr. and Mrs. Wessinger, who are also registered to speak, who live right next door to number 6. So that's what's before us. So we're going to hear now, I guess, from the Mr. McConville, and then Mr. Flynn is going to deal with the rebuttal.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Mark McConville with Humphreys Planning Group here. Figured I'd go through some of the changes since the initial proposal. We did make a variety of changes to deal with some concerns planning had raised. One of which we removed the second balcony from the attic. So now there's, rather than 13 variances, there's 12. So there's no longer a variance for the number of balconies. So that balcony has been completely removed. The second floor balcony has been reduced from 11.2 meters squared to 9 meters squared. The variance for the wall height, specifically the rear yard and the west side wall, has been reduced from 10.3 meters to 9.4. The FSI has been reduced from 0.69 to 0.649. So that's a difference from 545.2 meters squared to 509.9 meters squared of GFA. And then for the exception of 165 square meters plus a percentage of the lot area, we reduced that percentage of the lot area from 48.4% to 43.9%. And for the benefit of the committee, we provided a map which shows the context and character of the area, along with 14 other examples in the immediate area of other similarly approved variances. An architect's also prepared a sun shadow study and provided an opinion letter saying there's no substantial impact compared to the as of right building permissions and what's being proposed through this variance application. We have dealt with urban forestry as well, and there's an updated arborist report, and we are okay with the urban forestry condition as well as the 2 conditions noted by planning staff. And I'll just briefly touch on those comment letters received. Many of them were received before the last hearing, so they deal with many of the issues as part of the original proposal. For example, taking issue with the attic balcony. But if I could clear up some misconceptions on some of the comment letters, they note a flat roof being proposed, which is not the case here. It's not a flat roof as defined by the bylaw. And some comment letters mention a 3rd story being proposed. Again, that's not a defined 3rd story under the bylaw. It's an attic. So I just wanted to clear up those points as well.
Okay, so you'll have a chance, obviously, to respond, or Mr. Flynn will, to what the neighbors have to say. My comment is, again, I'm just looking, it's not a corner lot or anything wonky. So is it typical in this neighborhood to have 12 variances? You know, they're not, you know, it's just the number of variances sort of pops out at you on this application for a new build. to require
Yeah.
12 variances?
Yeah, you'll see on there's 14 examples. We just chose the most relevant ones based on the more contentious points. But many of these variance files include a dozen or more variances.
Okay.
So it is typical of the character of Edge Hill Road and Edge Valley, just so committee is aware.
You know, I know, they're not, I'm not meaning to malign your application. I see like length, you're off by a third of a, 0.3 of a meter. Height, 0.5 of a meter. They're not all outrageous. It's just the number, the pure number of what's going on with this lot that needs so many variances. So thanks for that explanation. So now we got to hear from the neighbors. And again, I stated at the outset, or when we have a lot of people on an application, I just try to say that other than, the people who are most directly affected, in this case, both adjacent neighbors, and I know there's a lot of concern and people are staying on the line, but there's no point repeating the same concerns that other people have raised. We don't have a huge well, we don't have that many. We have like 4 or 5. Some we've had like 15 speakers. And on those cases, I tried to say there's no point repeating the same things by subsequent speakers. In the non-virtual world, people come together, they meet, they appoint a couple of spokespeople. So if you can just keep that in mind in making your comments. So the first person, we just go in order. We have it here. Number 1, Edge Hill. Nadia Jasic is registered to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Hi, Committee of Adjustment members. I'm at 1 Edge Hill Road, just a few houses up. Mine is a new build as of about 15 years ago, and I would like to speak to the variances. It is not customary to have so many variances because I know when I went in with mine were very few. So definitely it seemed that this particular application is going for every maximum variance that they can push. The area, I actually don't want to repeat what their solicitor will be saying and what number 10 Edge Hill will be saying, which I think will carry a lot more weight, but I would not want this application to be approved as is, as it could set a precedent to the area and greatly diminish not only the aesthetic quality, but also set precedent to to asking for more and more and more variances. So I'll move on unless there's something else I need to add to what everybody else says, then I'll stay quiet.
Okay, this is your chance. Thank you. So you're at number 1. So now the next speaker is Mr. Wessinger, who number 6, right next door, so one of the most directly affected, in addition to the other neighbors on the other side. And we do have a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Wessinger on file. So welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for the committee for sitting so late here. It's almost 6 o'clock here, and I'm sure we all want to move on here. Okay, I'll be brief. I did write my submission there, and I'm not going to repeat most of that. I think my main points are that this project next door and several other projects that have been approved for quite large variances seems to be counter to the reason that the bylaws were changed back after the huge, what they called monster home builds of the 1980s. And they deliberately changed the bylaws to restrict building these large homes in a sense on smaller lots, which was very common in the 80s, as people who've been in the area for a long time know. And I think this is an example of this. Even though some other homes in the neighborhood are not taken into consideration, there are a lot of homes on these 2 streets and actually on some other streets that are original, and that is more reflective of the area. There has been, of course, a lot of development. Also, some of the homes that were referred to are across the road on the Ravine side, much larger lots, up to an acre. And so large homes on those lots have less effect on the neighbor. But where we stand, which is right next door, we're mainly concerned with the two issues, and I know that number 12 and number 10 are going to speak about this, but it's really the mass monster homes, they used to call it. And I'm not saying there's some of them around, but this monster home, which is going to be built approximately, I think the side yard setback is, let's say, 4 or 5 feet from the current lot line, and 4 feet from my house. And of course, my house, which was built under the old bylaws, was a large house for this size lot. And under the new bylaws, not the variances, but under the new bylaws which were enacted before 1992, when I built, you were allowed to build certain size houses, including larger coverage, small side yard setbacks. The new side yard setbacks have changed, of course. They've increased to try to create more separation. And in this particular house, this project for number 8, I find that the overall size request beyond what is currently allowed is not minor at all. The percentage is just large, even though I appreciate that they did redo the plan that reduced some of the aspects of it. It's still a very large house and very imposing, and including the 3rd floor. Now, just in the one comment there that was made about the attic, on the plans that we received, it shows a 3rd floor master bedroom. It doesn't show an attic, it shows a 3rd floor master bedroom with washrooms and walk-in closets. The original concept was that they were going to build 2-story, but, and if you look at the current plans, the 2nd floor, in a sense, has an area which seems to be a master bedroom, which was probably when it was originally conceived as a 2-story. But now with the 3rd floor addition, of course, the size of the building has gone up and the height has gone up. The biggest effect on the height, of course, is more exaggerated on the east side next to number 10. We'll speak to that. But that's my overall feeling here, that I thought that the community back in the 1980s was sick of these large monster homes on relatively small lots, especially on frontages, and that we were trying to restrict that, not to, by a system of variances, build the monster home, which we could build after the bylaws were changed. And that's part of the issue here. Plus, as other people will say, and I'm just about to wrap up here, we were misled, in our opinion, on this whole project. It started out as a renovation. It was purchased by the owner as a renovation, we thought, and he told us the first time he was going to renovate the inside, and he got it, basically. And he kept a few things, but then he changed his mind, and he told us then, well, no, he's now going to put a proper 2nd floor on, because it was mostly sort of dormer style, and he was going to build a 2nd floor on, a full 2nd floor, which would alleviate some of the problems. And it proceeded from there. Then after that, we thought he was going to then build a brand new house, because somebody told him that it was really cheaper to do the full new build and to deal with all the issues and the difficulties of trying to modify an existing home. Now, of course, cheaper doesn't mean that that your total costs are less, but that you'll get what you want more easily by starting from scratch. Mm-hmm. And that was after he told us that he was going to lower the basement of the existing house, and that would be the 2nd stage of his 2nd floor addition, so that he could deal with that. So, and now, and when we've got the final plans, we now see a full 3-story house with a master bedroom on the 3rd floor and a balcony up there, or a deck. So that's part of the problem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wessinger. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Wessinger before we move on to the next speaker?
Can I just say one more thing too? The arborist report, I forgot to mention that before this whole thing was developed for the 3-story build, there was, in my opinion, a very good tree in the backyard, a beautiful black walnut. And it was trimmed and eventually cut down, as we found out, without a permit. And we did call 311 to say that it shouldn't have been done, but we don't know what happened to that report and that call. It seems to have disappeared.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker is 12 Edgehill, Mr. Calvano, being represented by his solicitor, Brendan Ruddick from Loopstra Nixton. And in that regard, we have a copy of a letter dated March the 16th from Loopstra Nixon on behalf of number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I heard a beep, and I'm assuming that means my mic is live. So I hope you can hear me.
You can hear you loud and clear. Yep.
That's very good, Mr. Chair. My client's property is located at 12 Edgehill Road, and that's immediately abutting the rear property line of the subject property, perpendicular to the back of the lot. My client opposes the application that's before you. In my submission, the proposal represents an overdevelopment of the property that would not respect and reinforce the character of the area or meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. If approved, the house would result in undesirable impacts to the use and enjoyment of my client's backyard due to overlook and impacts on privacy. The combination of the variances requested for overall height, main wall height, GFA, lot coverage, and building length will produce a built form that's going to tower over neighboring properties, including my client's backyard. And the requested increase to the maximum size of a platform at or above the 2nd story from 4 meters squared to 9 meters squared is going to result in serious overlook and privacy concerns for my client and his neighbors. And my client also has overlook and privacy concerns as a result of the 3rd story windows. Now, the design of the roof line employs a mansard style as opposed to a gable or hip roof. And as I'm sure you're aware, this increases the massing impact of the dwelling by pushing the overall volume of the house farther towards the side yard setbacks, which results in a more boxy appearance similar to a flat roof house. The design also increases the percentage of the roof line that is at or close to the upper permitted height limit. Now, although it's relatively common for development in the area to use some variety of mansard roof design, the variances requested to overall height and sidewall height will cause an unacceptable massing impact that's exacerbated by this design choice. And I note here that the originally submitted plans they barely met the definition of a pitched roof house. And what that results in is a massing impact that's similar to what you'd experience on a flat roof dwelling, which, as I'm sure you're well aware, is subject to a lower overall height limit and a prohibition on 3rd stories. And what's being proposed here is much larger and, of course, includes the 3rd story. And in my submission, it's this variance, in particular to the height, is not consistent with the intent and purpose of the bylaw, which is to avoid those unacceptable massing impacts. That's why it distinguishes between flat and pitched roof dwellings. Now, based on a review of the updated plans, which I understand were submitted on the zoning waiver, it appears that the revised dwelling may actually not meet the bylaw definition of a pitched roof house and would instead be considered a flat roof house due to the percentage of the roof area that doesn't meet the minimum pitch requirement. And in my submission, that's problematic given staff's request for a condition tying construction to the plans that were submitted. And by the way, my client supports that condition fully if Mr. Chair, you're inclined and the committee is inclined to grant approval. So as a result of this, if you're not inclined to deny the application outright, I'd ask that you defer consideration of the application until this issue has been clarified for the sake of certainty. Now I'm going to wrap up just by.
It's kind of late to ask for referral, but what were you advising? And you deal with the
Mr. Chair, the concern.
Yeah, whether we have a larger flat roof variance. That's the part of your letter that you're questioning.
That's correct. Although that's right. It's really a question of certainty. If the variances are tied to plans that don't comply with the zoning bylaw or don't comply with the zoning bylaw as varied through the variances, that's problematic. And although it's, I'm sure the response will be it's the applicant's risk, there's really a question of certainty here. And I think for the sake of certainty, it would be better for all parties to have a review so that we know what is actually being approved.
Anyway, that's not it. We have an application before us. We're 20 minutes into hearing it. We're not adjourning at this point as a throwaway, as an alternative. We're making a decision on this application. We don't hear applications. Sometimes we do for an hour and they'll make a decision, but that's very rare. So we appreciate your presentation and your concerns on this application. If you want to wrap up, you've gone over the 5 minutes, so you can wrap up.
Yes,
like.
Mr. Chair, if I may just speak to the map that was provided to you. In my submission, it shows a few things. First, it shows that, if you're familiar with the neighborhood, there's been a great deal of reinvestment and redevelopment, and there has been some minor variance activity. And if you look at the map, that includes actually my client's property and the deputants that you heard before him. And they're appearing before you in opposition to the application. In my submission, that demonstrates that the neighbors are not opposed to redevelopment. They're not opposed to even redevelopment that includes minor variances. It's just that what is being proposed here is at a scale and a level that goes beyond what's acceptable and does not respect and reinforce the character of the area.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd also comment that, yeah. If I may, I just wanted one comment on the list of variances, the map showing other approvals in the area, that it's being provided to you without any further context. And it's really not helpful without that context or without a photo study, so you can see what those variances actually translate to. And I think you'll find that they're not comparable to what's before you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Also, I guess you did mention that the other side of the street, or maybe it was a previous speaker, are ravine lots on 1 acre lots. You're a lot tighter on this side of the street, on the even side. Any questions for Mr. Ruddick before we move on to the next speaker? Okay, thank you. Next speaker is 10 Edge Hill, right next door on the other side, Dr. Eyal Golan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I am not a solicitor, but I'll speak on behalf of how we feel about this.
Yes.
So initially, I'll just give you some context. The owner came to us and asked for an endorsement, came to us on the 5th of December, showed us a plan of what he had in mind for the rebuild. He had already done some renovations, but then decided to build, and that's okay. And he showed us a design on the 5th of December, which we endorsed, not knowing that on the very next day, on the 6th of December, he submitted a proposal that was entirely different, 3 stories, much bigger. And I think that speaks to him knowing that there is no way that the neighbors would have accepted the variances that he suggested. And so he went through essentially trying to make us not realize that we signed one piece of paper and he submitted something entirely different. And I think that speaks to the character of how you would go about doing this. If you think you have a legitimate proposal, just submit it. If there's some variances, just submit them. There's a for that, they will look into it. If it meets the 4 tests, then go ahead. But the very fact that it was a deceitful kind of way of doing it, I think that's what rubbed a lot of the neighbors in this way. So I think that's the context. With regards to our specific concerns, we share 2 boundaries. So we share the front and the side. In fact, even the back of the house. So we are probably the most affected of the neighbors. I have to say, this does not meet the 4 tests from what I can tell. The variances, though they're called minor in combination or not, the house itself would be much, much larger than we have seen. In fact, the only comparable houses that would be about that size will be on the opposite side of the street where the lots are 5 or 6 times the size of this one, and they're in a distance where you don't actually feel it. The way this would be is his house would be about 15 feet above our house, with a patio that would look directly onto our backyard. And I mean directly above, like their house would be pushed back and forward and up. And so all our windows on one side of the house will be blocked. There will be security concerns for us and our 3 young children in the back, where you have a large, double the size of the maximum allotted patio, essentially staring at our backyard. And so it's a combination of the house is probably too high, it's too long, it's too big, and also the manner by which it went by that rubbed a lot of us the wrong way. I would also like to point out that in the proposal, there is no living green space. So in fact, they're removing all trees, all grass, and the backyard will be not a regular, what is called shed, but it's a 650 square foot cabana with an indoor-outdoor shower, cement, a pool, and a large deck. So what you're essentially looking at is no green space and a nice party area. And that's great, but that doesn't exactly conform to our neighborhood. And I think the very fact that one person can remove all living green space from their property, I'm not sure that's allowed. I'm not sure that's considered a minor variance either. And I do understand the rationale. I think one of their children has an allergy to grass, but nevertheless, the combination of all these things is a lot to take in. A 3rd floor, which is not an attic, it's a full master bedroom. The shed that is actually a 650 square foot cabana is not a shed. I think the manner by which this went by and trying to deceive some of the neighbors. So I personally feel quite strongly that this cannot proceed in this manner. I don't think it passes the 4 test. I'm happy to have a new house. I'm happy to have be a wonderful neighbor like we are to everybody else. But I think there's an element of respect and cordiality that has not happened. And I think a future plan we'd be happy to endorse, but it cannot be this one.
Okay, thank you for that submission, and you're just at your 5-minute mark, more or less. So you mentioned that there's no soft soft landscaping. I don't see a variance here, Mr. Carvalino. There's no
in the
variance for soft
backyard
landscaping here.
So in the front yard, I think he's retaining the grass, and there's a tree. In the backyard, there's already been removal of shrubs and bushes and a large tree, as you heard before. The rest is removal of all living green space. I think there's artificial turf in a small area, and then this large cabana in a quote entertainment area.
Yeah.
So it's essentially
yes. I'm just saying I don't see, usually there's a separate front yard landscape minimum and a rear yard. I don't see any reference here unless they missed it. I'm not disputing what you're saying in terms of all these things they got going on with the pool and the accoutrements to the pool. Just pointed out that it's not there. So does anyone have any questions for Dr. Golan before we go to the next speaker? And yeah, you're looking at the location map. It looks like you're all sort of bunched together, 8, 6, and 10, and there isn't a lot of wiggle room there. So looking at the location map that you were provided with. So the next speaker, and I guess it's the last speaker we have in opposition, is, you said, 1 Edge Valley Drive, Mark Ribello?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yes, I know everyone's been sitting here a long time. I've been on since about 3 o'clock, waiting for this moment. I just want to, besides reiterating what all my neighbors said, first, I am 2 houses away from this build and can see the backyard from my backyard. Yep. And basically all I wanted to say was that the person making the application and all the variances, they've shown a total lack of transparency in the way they first got our 4 endorsement letters from myself and other friendly neighbors that I often meet together. Mm-hmm. So the applicant showed up to our house, befriended us over a couple of months, and then got us to sign letters of endorsement without showing us plans, advising us that he was going to keep the same footprint and only move it back a little bit by about a foot or so. So once the plans were submitted, we looked through them, and they are in total contrast to what he told us. Now, that's not one of the concerns of this committee. However, it speaks to his dishonesty. I listened to the agent talking to you, and the description of the master bedroom upstairs with a shower and the other things that were described is not an attic and can't be seen as such. Yes, the third floor balcony was taken away. However, there's still big windows on that third floor space where the balcony was going to be that can directly look down. And this is a little bit hard to understand, but Edge Valley and Edge Hill from that house north are parallel to each other for the most part. And so this would give the applicant the view of all the backyards on both Edge Valley and Edge Hill, especially at that height. So he will have a total view of pretty much all backyards going north from there. And if you look at a Google map, it'll show it a little bit better. So my main point to this is just all the stuff in this application seems to be either wrong, misleading, miscalculating, and misrepresented here in this court. And I don't want to see this court being brought into disrepute by giving false facts and being misled in order to accept this application. I think all the neighbors around are not against him building something within the bylaw. But when I heard before that the height is only going to be increased by 0.5 of a meter or half a meter, and I look at the maximum is 9.6 to what he's doing to 10 point something, and the current house that exists there is only 7 point something high, I don't see how that's a minor variance. So I just wanted to bring this to light to the committee that while we don't want to put this off, there are a lot of things that need to be fact checked, such as this attic. Is there still a bedroom in it? Is it not? The balcony that was removed, is it one that can just be added? Is there a pool in this thing or is it not? Is it a shed or is it a cabana? And so I just bring all this up because there are a lot of unanswered questions, and us as the neighbors are very concerned that this will set a precedent that basically uses the houses on Edge Hill on the east side and on the south side of Edge Hill, whose lots are like some 200 by 700, 200 by 800 feet.
Right.
And they have these massive houses that overlook the Humber River. So I just don't want to mislead the court. I want you to do your due diligence to make a proper decision. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ribello. First of all, we're a quasi-judicial tribunal, not a court, but it is what it is. And in terms of
I appreciate it. I'm sorry for any misprocedure.
Sorry, I just said we're a quasi-judicial tribunal. We're not a court, but there is similarities. And again, what's before us are the variances, and if the applicant did anything in the event of approval, he is caught by that. And community planning, and someone said they would like to see that, has recommended, I believe on this one, in event of approval, they wanted some provisions put in, conditions to sort of keep them basically dealing with the wall heights and the rear and east side exterior main wall heights. So, but the issue is I agree, there's a lot of variances here, and it's a tight lot. They can't compare themselves to the houses on the odd-numbered houses across the street on the ravine. So, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ribello before we go back to Mr. Flynn to respond to the concerns of all the neighbors? Okay, Mr. Flynn. I understand.
Chairman, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Good. All right, maybe we can deal with some of these obvious things right away. There is no forestry comment on a tree in the rear yard. I actually spoke directly to forestry this morning about it, and they said, yeah, there was a tree removed. We have no comment. That's all they had to say about it. Then you go on to the commentary about landscaping in the rear yard or the front yard or whatever yard they want to talk about. There is no variance for landscaping. Obviously, the applicant is meeting the requirements under that section of the bylaw.
So just if I can interject, sorry, Mr. Flynn, just before you move on to that. So is there any landscape, is there a rear yard landscape performance standard in the bylaw? And they meet it, or is it just no performance? You don't need
It's a 50%. You have to landscape 50%.
So they meet that because we don't see a variance for that. Okay. Wanted to clarify.
Yeah, there is no variance for that. Then they talk about the old bylaw versus the new bylaw. The fact is that 9 of the 14 variances outlined or demonstrated on that picture from our planner, 9 of them are under the new bylaw. So obviously, whatever was being achieved by writing the new bylaw was achieved, and then variances were approved from it.
Well, sorry, I don't understand.
So you would think
You want to go back and see that? Because I'm saying I'm looking here, everything other than variance number 7? No. Everything other than variance number 9 appears to be both under bylaw 569/2013. Is that the current bylaw?
2013 is the current bylaw.
Okay, so what are you saying? It looks to me every single bylaw here is under 2013-569, other than variance number 9, which is under the soffit height. Isn't every variance before us, all 12 of them under 569/2013?
That's not the point I was making, sir.
What was the point you were making?
They're saying that the bylaw was changed to stop monster homes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I look at this chart that we provided, and you look at number 1, that variance was granted in 2013. Number 2, granted in 2016. Number 4, number 5, granted in 2018. Number 6, granted in 2017. Number 7, granted in 2013. Number 8, granted in 2015. Number 11, granted in 2014. And it goes on. So 13 was 2015, 14 was granted in 2019. So the point that they were trying to make was that, somehow all this new bylaw was created so that none of this would happen anymore. Well, it has happened. And, people keep trying to redevelop and reinvest. And this is the kind of home that needs or wants to be on that street. So it's a transition neighborhood, believe it or not. Even though the homes are large, you have this driving need to have all these different things. Now, when you talk about the actual variances that are being requested, so you're saying we have 12? 5 of them are related to height. If you look at the drawings, you will see that the actual height of the roof, the peak of the roof, is 9.5 meters above grade. That's the height. The actual wall height is related to a window in the roof, not the wall height. And that's one of the problems with the interpretation that building gives wall height. In the olden days, it was a soffit height. So you measured from grade up to the soffit, and that gave you a pretty black and white height. Now it doesn't. So if you have a window in your roof, it measures to the top of the window. And that doesn't really demonstrate what the actual height of that wall is. Further, this lot is a rolling lot. It changes elevation, grade elevation, from front to back and side to side. So the numbers are skewed because of that. It's not a consistent flat lot, and therefore you can't really argue that these heights are ridiculous. Not only that, the property at number 10 actually will overlook this house if it was approved at the heights requested. So it's still taller. But as they say, they got built at a previous time. So it doesn't really matter to them. So there's all kinds of things going on here. And you know what? I have too many notes, frankly.
Yeah, you're at 5 minutes, so I'll give you an extra because there were 4 people speaking. You can have another minute or so. Would you please try to wrap up, Mr. Flynn? Thanks.
All right. Somebody used the word prohibition or prohibited. It's not. There is no prohibited in the bylaw. He was speculating on flat versus pitched. Building department has interpreted this roof to be a pitched roof. The fact that we have a waiver was for the changes we made. We did not change the roof and we did not change the height. What else we got here? Talked about the our length variance is for 0.3. That's 1 foot. I don't think that's excessive. There's no shed variance, and as we probably all know, ancillary buildings are not allowed to be greater than 10% of the lot area. So that's not a variance. Then we talked about height, view, ancillary buildings, et cetera, et cetera. None of these things are creating a big impact. We've created a shadow study. Part of the shadow study actually had a view study, and there is not a great deal of invasion. We agreed with planning to frost the bathroom windows so that there was no overlook. We got rid of the balcony at the third, what they call the third floor, which is actually the attic, or the attic space, to eliminate that problem. So what you basically have here is a two-story house with a pitched roof, and the roof area, otherwise known as an attic, is being utilized as habitable space. And that's been done over and over again in central Etobicoke. Pardon me. It's a very popular thing. It's a way to increase usable space without increasing massing and impact on other properties. So
Okay,
I don't think sorry?
Going to wrap up. You're at 20. You're at 8
All right.
minutes. 8 minutes. So.
I believe that this generally is in keeping with the bylaw and the zoning bylaw and the official plan and appropriate development, and has little or no impact, and planning department supports it. There is no city department who has an issue with this application. We're satisfied with planning's condition, and we're prepared to accept that.
Okay,
So we
Mr.
ask
Flynn.
for-
Can you please wrap
you.
up?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Just
Mr.
a
Chair.
quick question, and it brought up about this. So it looks like you have two platforms, one on the second, one on the third, whereas one platform above the main level is permitted. One of them is 11.2 meters squared, and the other one is 5.64. So you got two platforms. Can you advise what rooms are those off? Because are those off of private bedrooms, or are they off of common areas, especially the one on the second floor, which is larger?
Yeah, first of all, there's only one now. The third floor is removed, like deleted. The second one is reduced to 9 square meters.
It's in the zoning notice.
And yeah, the revised drawings show that. And it's off a bedroom.
So they're both off a bedroom.
The one remaining is off a bedroom, yes.
Okay. The one on the second. So the other one, because I don't know if I'm looking at the old notice or the new notice. Here, the new notice. Doesn't it have that as a variance? One of your variances?
We did a waiver on that.
The maximum is 4. Okay, 9. No, but there was another, that was the variance you eliminated, where there was one variance that said you're only allowed one platform and you had 2. So that's the variance that disappeared. That's why we had 13 and we now have 12. Right, got you? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Committee members, any follow-up questions for Mr. Flynn and or for any of the neighbors, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
Danny Benissimo has questions for the applicant. If staff can put up the front elevation.
Let me try and do that while I'm on. Okay.
That's correct. I don't know who would like to address my question, but a bit confusing your presentation where you talked about overall height. The way I'm reading this drawing, and you can clarify it for me, you mentioned something about windows impacting roof for heights. I see the top of the roof at 1.2 sorry, 10.560. Is that correct? That's what that shows there.
I don't believe that's true. Hang on one moment, please.
All right, it's on the drawing on the right, far right.
On the far right, on page, let me look at this.
On the one that's being shown on the screen, it's the
I've
front
got
elevation.
I've got page A6, front elevation.
Yes.
Okay, if you enlarge it, it says 9.5 meters.
That's the maximum height.
If that's what it is.
Sorry, that's what I'm trying to clarify. Is it 10.560? Is that what's being proposed? And the maximum is 9.5 allowed.
I'm enlarging it right now. 10.56, you're correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
10.56 is what's proposed.
And
Variance
this
number 8?
elevation,
Yes.
okay, I just wanted to clarify that, but you had said something about the fact that windows now impact the roof height, where I'm seeing the roof height as top of roof, which is the peak of that, what you call the slope roof, correct?
Correct.
And you can see on this drawing that the slope roof is a very minor piece of the elevation. Anyone looking at it from the street would not see that peak roof, they would see a flat roof visually.
Well, the sides of that roof are all sloped.
I realize that, but I'm talking about the top part. I just want to clarify, because one presenter, maybe more than one, raised this question about, is this a flat roof or a slope roof? And I believe you indicated in your presentation that zoning has looked at this drawing, and I would like to ask staff to put up the drawing before that, which is the roof plan.
Right.
Correct? Now, there are no slope indications here in terms of the flat roof. There are some slopes indicated on the outside of that. But your interpretation is that that is a slope roof.
That's correct. It's less than 40%.
Even though it comes up less than a half a meter at the center, from my calculation anyway. There's no cross section, so I can't even address that, but this,
well, the flat area is less than 40%, and that's how building department judges it. The
so can you
plan.
explain that again? I didn't hear that, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The cutoff line is 40% of area of the roof.
Okay.
So any flat area is added together, and it cannot total 40% or more. In this case, it does not total 40%, and
But
that's how
so-
they interpret flat.
So they interpret that center piece as a slope roof, not as a flat roof.
Correct.
Okay, and there's no angle on it. So the last question has to do with the drawing before that. And that's the third floor plan.
All right, let me.
That's the drawing just before the roof plan.
The third floor plan?
Yes.
All right, I'm ready.
Now, you had said definitely that's an attic, but yet your drawing says it's a third floor plan. Doesn't say attic.
Yeah, that's because planning department or building department's interpretation is that it's a third floor. Even
But
though
yet-
in a normal situation it would be an attic.
I understand, but an attic is not supposed to be habitable.
That's why they're calling it. Yeah, that's why they're calling it a third floor. As soon as you start to use it as either mechanical or habitable, it becomes a third floor.
Right, I just wanted to clarify that because these are your drawings, not the city's drawings, and your designer called this a third floor, not an attic. And it occupies visually, maybe hard to tell, I'd say about 40%, 30, maybe 33% of the total attic area. Is that correct, more or less?
That's correct.
So there's no real determination in the zoning bylaw, unless you can clarify this for me, where an attic becomes a third floor, but it is a third floor because it was calculated in terms of gross floor area, correct?
Yes.
It was
So-
included in the gross floor area, so it impacts all the variance. The variance is related to floor area,
Yes.
because attics are not included as a gross floor area. Okay.
Attics are not, but as soon as it's
Attics are not
habitable,
included.
as soon as it's habitable, it is included.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, the word attic is not really the proper word. In this case, it's a third floor.
That's why we called it a third floor, because planning or building department called it a third floor.
Yeah, just in your presentation, you emphasize that it's an attic and shouldn't be looked at as a third floor.
So it's
Oh, no, from a visual perspective and from a massing perspective, what I said was it's effectively a two-story house with a roof, just like any other peaked roof. In this case, we're using the attic space as habitable space, which is then called a third floor. It's not.
Yeah, in my experience with existing homes which have big attics like this, people do go forth with an application for a building permit and sometimes going through zoning where they convert the attic into a habitable space.
Yes.
So, and that's common practice.
Yes.
Right? So I just want to emphasize that this is really a third floor, and because many people take attics like this because the structure allows it. In many
Mr.
cases.
Bellissimo, he's saying it's a third floor. Everyone agrees it's a third floor. We've been spending 5 minutes on this. It's a third floor. It's not an attic. It's a third floor. We beat this point to death. It's a third floor. What's the point you're trying to get at? What's the point? I don't understand what you're trying to get at. Are you trying to say it's buried in the roof, so it shouldn't count? I don't understand what point you're trying to make. It's a third floor. Mr. Flynn has said it 4 times now. City planning.
Mr. Flynn, are you going to let me speak, or are you going to speak all the time?
Well, you've been going on in 4 minutes now about this issue.
I'm
Finish
not
off on
going
this
on.
issue
I'm
of the
trying
third
to
floor. Let me know where
extract-
you're going with this issue. Where are you going with this issue? It's a third floor. It's 20 to 7. It's a third floor. He said it 4 times. Once you live in it or have
Mr.
mechanical, it's a third floor. So where are you going with this argument? Please tell me.
There's no argument. I was asking for clarification, and I'm reacting to his presentation. I believe it's the right of the committee members to act and ask questions of a presentation. So you said the third floor 4 times as well. I understand that. And that was the end of my question. Thank you.
Wonderful. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Flynn?
May I make a
Is
comment?
someone ready to
It's
make
10
a
Edgehill.
motion? Sorry?
Hello?
Hear that. Sorry?
May I please make a comment? It's 10 Edgehill Road.
Who's talking? I don't know who's talking.
10 Edgehill Road, AL Golan, the next door neighbor.
Sorry, sir.
Sorry, Mr.
Sir,
Flynn.
we don't go back and forth. You made your presentation. Mr. Bellissimo is asking questions. We're in committee now, so we're not taking any more questions from residents or the applicant unless they're asked a question. Okay, so I'm sorry, but let's move on. You can't come back in unless someone asked you a question. Your presentation was made. Mr. Bellissimo is now asking questions, as is his right to do. And we've established this is a third floor. It's not an attic. Whatever it was called or referred to, it's a third floor. Community planning considers it a third floor. The applicant considers it a third floor. It's got a master bedroom. It's a third floor. So I don't understand what the issue is there. So let's see if anyone's ready to make a motion if there's no further questions.
Mr. Chair, I find that all of the variances are pretty closely aligned with what's permitted as of right. And when we consider the sensitive issue about massing, I focus on things like lot coverage. And in this case, the lot coverage is very close to what's permitted as of right. I think about yard requirements, slight adjustments to the front and rear yard, none to the sides. And of course, height. And this proposal exceeds the height by just over a meter. And as was just demonstrated, only a small portion of the roof meets that 10.56 meter height. So all in all, I find the variances to be in keeping with the 4 tests under the Planning Act.
Okay.
And I move for approval, subject to urban forestry condition 2 and the 2 conditions requested by the Planning Department.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Do we have a seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion?
I will second.
Ms. Alderson, okay. All in favor? Okay, you have unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Flynn, and thank you, neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Okay, our next application is item number 46. 23 GRENVIEW Boulevard North. Hold on a second. This is an application to construct a two-story north and south side additions and a rear second-story addition. There are 5 variants. We have a covering letter. Transportation has 2 conditions of approval, 3 letters of support, 2 letters of opposition. And in the late arriving materials, we also have approval from 30 Wendover and 25 GRENVIEW next door. This matter was deferred from the March 9th hearing. And we have Zihong Shah of Colmone and Associates is the agent who did not pre-register, and we have 2 speakers from 22 and 24 Wendover.
Mr. Chairman, instead of Zihong Shah, Mr. John Colmone from this, obviously from the same company,
Okay.
I will be presenting the application.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Colmone. I'll be making the presentation for this application. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. I wanted to just give you some background information on this particular application. Our clients specifically purchased in this neighborhood because of the wonderful and charming character of the community. The last thing they would want to do is compromise it. I can attest to their strong desire to maintain the architectural integrity and fit within the neighborhood. And I think this is evident by way of the application before you. The initial design was to construct a 2-story rear addition. The intent was to preserve a tree that was located behind the house. And although they've had to compromise on their design in order to facilitate saving the tree, so we submitted an application to the committee. Again, this application also required variances. And at the same time, we had requested an arborist to prepare an arborist report. When the report was completed, it was deemed that there was no way to save this tree. And as a result, we amended the application to at least give the clients a little more of what they wanted. And again, all in all, it's still a pretty modest application. I think in terms of, I do believe you have my covering letter. I don't know if you've had a chance to review it, so I won't go into detail on all the points. But I think if you examine the variances requested, they're all relatively minor in nature. And with the biggest concern, I think that's arisen is related to the parking pad or parking space that's going to be located in the front. And really the reality here is that it doesn't change the current functionality of the parking. The driveway is extremely tight, the backyard is inaccessible, and this 2-foot projection to the side is really not going to change what exists today in terms of parking arrangement. In summary, Mr. Chairman, we feel the variances requested meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. I do believe you'd mentioned the letters of support as well as some letters of opposition. And if there are any questions from the committee, I'll be happy to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Cullimore. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Cullimore before we move on to the next speaker? Mr. Taylor?
Yes, thanks. I have a question, Mr. Chair. Yes, the transportation request that either the front parking pad be removed or the site plan be revised to show required the dimensions that they set out, 5+ meters by 3+ meters. Sorry, did you say, sir, that you cannot or will not be able to do that?
No, in fact, I've had some dialogue. We received this memo from traffic, I guess March 16th, past the deadline for me to be able to respond and submit documentation to the committee. I did send a dimensioned plan to traffic indicating that we could provide the parking space without encroaching on municipal property. I have not seen a response or reply to my email, but I did submit a copy to the Secretary Treasurer, and I don't know if that is on record or available to you, but we can accommodate the parking space.
Okay, thank you. I don't think it's critical at this juncture to be in receipt of a response from transportation. I was just giving you a heads up that should we approve this, it would likely be with that condition, and I wanted to make sure you could at least comply with it.
Yes, absolutely. And our intention is not to alter the current driveway.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's move on to hear from Joseph Sunday at 22 Wendover. And we have a letter dated March 14th, which is a newly arrived letter from Mr. and Mrs. Sunday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the challenging job the committee has in conducting these remote meetings and trying to coordinate all the different documents that have to be kept up to date.
Okay.
In the March 14th email, I'm commenting more, yes, on the parking in the front. Within the Kingsway, we feel fairly strongly that we don't want side-by-side parking on narrow 30-foot lots. And that's pretty well been held. At the same time, with this application, we're encountering and trying to understand for the first time the secondary dwelling unit and the regulations that are in effect with it. One of them, as we understand, is that there has to be two separate parking for two separate cars on the property because of that request for a second dwelling unit in the basement. That means that, do they have enough room at the front to keep it on the single lane driveway that they currently have? Or does one of those spots have to be at the back of the house? Naturally, our driveways are somewhat narrow, but quite a number of us manage to get our cars into the back and into garages, however, between these narrow houses and narrow driveways. We don't know what the regulations are for, where these parking spots have to be, but we do not want to extend the width in the front and for a front parking pad. We want the driveways to remain as they are and narrow. With the secondary dwelling unit, there's also a requirement for a second egress, usually a window well of a certain large size. And currently the plan seems to show that coming into the driveway, which would make that driveway at the back unusable for parking. So if we require two spots and one has to be at the back, then that would make that impossible. As well, extending the house by 2 feet south into the driveway, again, makes it unusable to put a parking spot at the back. So if we have to have two parking spots, where can they be within the bylaws for and the secondary dwelling unit?
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so we've now heard. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sunday based on his presentation and his letter? And if not, we'll move on to hear from Mr. Sexton at 24 Wendover.
Hello. Hello, I'm Don Sexton at 24 Wendover, the adjoining backyards with the applicant. Thanks for the committee to extend your time to hear this out. I too are concerned about the parking pad. That's a major objection request that's in variance number 5. It's not in keeping with the neighboring properties. extending north and south on Grenview for the entire block, as Mr. Sunday has indicated. In recent conversation with the owner and their architect, it's claimed that they never have an intention for front yard parking pad. The owner, in fact, canvassed and promised neighbors up and down the street that they will not be putting in a parking pad. So if the applicant indeed does not want to install a parking pad, I suggest the possibility of placing a condition upon the approval of this variance to be the owner's agreement to never use their front yard as a parking pad and maintain the 50-50 ratio to maintain the limit of front parking area, regardless of the approval of this specific number 5 variant, which would give permission for a parking pad. I feel this would resolve the issue for myself and other street residents, as well as keeping the applicant honest to what they've promised to numerous people on their street and have obtained letters of support based on the promise that they put forward. So I ask for them to stand behind the promises. So with that, I'll curtail my further comments and leave it in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sexton. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sexton before we move back to the agent to respond to the concerns of the neighbors? Okay, so Mr. Calmon, the floor is yours to respond to the neighbors' concerns.
All right. As I've indicated earlier, there is no intention to widen the driveway. I did speak to Mr. Don Sexton earlier today, and we had a very good conversation. And the concern was adding a parking pad or extending the width of the driveway, and there's no intention to do so. As far as the secondary suite is concerned, secondary suites are permitted as of right. In fact, the building code has redefined the term house in the code to include up to 2 units. Also, I just want to point out that the variance related to that secondary unit speaks to alterations to the building that can be viewed from the front facade. The reality is there's no portion of that secondary unit that's in the portion of the first floor or second floor. It's clearly in the basement. And certainly not the driver of the addition. If we needed a second parking spot, there would have been an additional variance added, and that's not the case. That concludes my rebuttal, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So, wasn't there a variance though for when a secondary street changes the appearance of the front of, like, is there a second door, or
Nope.
the access is through internal?
Nope.
Not visible.
Yeah, the access is internal. The addition, it's that 2-foot jut out as a result of the side addition. Because it's visible from the front elevation, that's why it was interpreted as a variance related to the secondary suite. But the reality is that superstructure is not part of the secondary suite. Under the zoning regulations, you can have up to 45% of the GFA within the dwelling for the secondary unit. It's not specifically allocated to the basement,
right?
But in our case, it is. So the addition is not a result of the secondary suite.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Colmore. Any anything to add to that, or you're done?
I'm done.
We'll see. Okay, we'll see if committee members have any questions for you or the neighbors for that matter, or if someone's ready to bring a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied the variances meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I move approval subject to urban forestry condition 2 and the condition requested by the Transportation Department.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Taylor. I have a seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion. Okay,
second that.
Rishi McCluskey, I saw your hand up go first. It was very close. Second that? Thank you. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you. You have your approval. Thank you, Mr. Calmon and neighbors. Okay, we'll now move to our last item on today's agenda. 182 Queens Avenue. This matter was before the committee back in February, at which time it was deferred in order to consult with engineering and construction services. We have supporting material. We have an applicant's presentation, and we have in the we have Urban Forestry requesting number 5 a refusal, and we have a new memo dated March 19th from. Oh no, this is. I thought we had something. Didn't we have something from engineering? Okay, and we just got something else on email, something to do with Councillor Grimes and the report from Heritage. So it was supposed to be a 6-month, but it now has managed to turn it around in a month. And is this supposed to be attached? Because I don't have anything attached. It says the report.
So, Mr. Chair, we do have a late arrival from Heritage Preservation Services, and that was emailed to the members. So there is a report from HPS.
Right.
And we do have memo from Engineering and Construction Services, which now includes Transportation Services comments, which it didn't before, dated March 19th. And that is also in the emailed additional materials that was sent to the members.
Okay, and the second grouping, well, that was the one I just had here. So it talks about, but it mentions a report, but I don't see the report. For your reference, the latest report from Heritage is attached. Councillor Grimes insisted the home be reviewed, even though the time when requested was for 6 months. Staff have managed to turn it around in a month. Thank you. Kind regards, Mary L. Campbell, Senior Policy Advisor, Planning. So where's the report? That's not. Okay. I just want to make sure everyone has that. In the meantime, so that's what we have before us. We have there's conditions from Economic and Construction Services. And okay, so we'll turn it over to Mrs. Evangelista, the agent for the applicant, and then we have several speakers registered to speak as well. Welcome. Last
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members. Good. I'll try to be quick. I know it's been a very long day for all of you. Okay, so you are all now in receipt of the memorandum from Heritage. Determined that there is insufficient evidence to demonstrate the property meets the provincial criteria under designation. So that has all been dealt with. And I will address Engineering Construction Services, their standard comments, and we're in agreement to tying that as a condition. So what you have in front of you is a lot that's zoned RMU3, and the intent is to sever into two equal lots for 2 detached dwellings. Now, this property is close to the Mimico GO station along with TTC on rural York. As you have seen, planning is in support. Engineering Construction Services, including transportation, they are also in support, and and Heritage has made their comments, as I previously mentioned. Now, forestry, we had addressed forestry comments because they are referring to the horse chestnut tree in the front of the home, which is not being touched. It has a caliper of, I believe, 0.50. It's small. The driveway, one of the driveways we are proposing remains. We're not touching it. The tree TPZ is 1.8. And we are 1.99 away from the edge of the driveway. So that tree will be protected. It's not being removed. Now, and we did supply forestry with the arborist report, and that said there must have, something had fallen through the cracks. Anyways, so our lot area, we're asking for an additional 22 square meters and an FSI of 0.68. And that said, that equates to an additional 25 square meters, but our main floor footprint is 0.34. We do not have a coverage. We do not have an overall height. We do have main wall height. We are asking for an additional main wall height of 1 meter. However, our overall height is below the 9.50. We have our side yard setbacks. I would like to add that we have worked very closely with planning, and we are consistent with what is in the neighborhood. Our side yard setbacks that have been requested through planning does allow for everyday access. It allows for maintenance, repair, light, air, and emergency services. And they're quite satisfied with the side yard setbacks that we are requesting. And we have no landscaping variance. And now I would like to add, this lot, what we're proposing is characteristic to the neighborhood. Having a lot of this size with one house would allow for a house of 4,200 square feet. That's one large home on this lot, which I believe would be a monster home. So, you travel through the neighborhood and you come across, bungalows, 2 stories, triplexes, duplexes, semis, apartment buildings. It's a very diverse area of homes and lot sizes. And it's a harmonious blend of the past, the present, and what is to come. The 2 homes that are being proposed in the area, if you take a look at the pictures that I submitted, you will see that what we're proposing is actually, in fact, what is happening in the neighborhood. It's a traditional style home, so we have taken into account the peaks that, is characteristic to the lot. It's not a transitional home. It's not a flat roofed home. So we have been very sensitive in the design to what is in the neighborhood. It will maintain an appropriate relationship with the surrounding areas. And the home has many characteristics of other homes in the neighborhood. And you'll see, and if you've, and I know many of you have gone through the neighborhood and you see, and along with the pictures that I've supplied and the aerial view, it speaks to the context of the neighborhood. It speaks to what is now happening in this neighborhood, the regeneration that is going on. The proposed variances will facilitate a reinvestment in this area in a manner that respects the planned context and existing built form and is a minor form of intensification. I respectfully submit that this proposal does fit and is compatible with the area.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Evangelista. Good timing, too. Does anyone have any questions before you move on to hear from the neighbors with concerns or in opposition? Okay, no one? Okay, the next we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speakers. Again, I'll advise if you're not directly affected by next door, like 180 and one. I don't know if we have anyone at on the other side at 184. We just have 180. But the other neighbors, if you there's no point repeating things that other people have stated if you in terms of what your concerns are. So the first version we'll go to is Cameron Joint at 176 Queens Avenue. So you're
Mr. Chair,
couple of units
sorry
over.
to interrupt. We sent out the memorandum from HPS to the members that was submitted yesterday, and staff is going to put it up on the screen so that the members can see it as well.
Okay, so that's basically, last time we were here, Heritage indicated they needed 6 months to determine whether this property had heritage value. They now turn it around in 1 month, determine that no, there is no significant heritage resource. Heritage has no further comments than the proposed minor variance and severance application for this property. So the heritage issue is off the table. As of very recent, I think as of yesterday's memo. So the first speaker is Cameron Joint at 176 Queens, a couple of doors down from the property in question.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My concern with the proposal pertains to the arrangement of the adjacent houses. So the neighbor to the south side, that house is built right up against the north end of its own lot, so right up against the lot line. And existing today, there's a large driveway, and then the house, which is proposed to be torn down, is right up against the far side of its lot line, and so far as you go down the street. The house to the south side actually has a significant number of windows on its north side, so up against the lot line. And that's just reflective of the way that the houses have been arranged. Those houses are both 100-year-old plus houses, and that's the way they've been done. So the proposal basically takes this house with right up to the lot line as well against it. So you're going to have both those houses right up against each other, and we're proposing to take it closer to the lot line than is a standard variance or standard setback, and also taller than standard setback. And those two features, I think, are just not respectful to the existing property that's there and the way that it's arranged. I would suggest that the committee should consider keeping on that side of the property to the standard setbacks in light of the way that the existing house has been built and has been there for more than 100 years. So that house is tighter to the lot line than would be, I think, standard today, but that's just the way that they were built 100 years ago under the old variances. Mm-hmm. So I'll keep it brief, given that we're past 7 o'clock. But that would be the thing that I would ask you guys to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joyne. And I point out that Mr. Rinaldi, the neighbor at 180, is scheduled to speak 2 speakers from now, so he can possibly opine as to the impact on his property. You're, I guess, 2 properties over from him. There's 170 and 176. So thanks for drawing that to our attention. And Mrs. Evangelist will obviously address that in her response when she's heard everyone's concerns. So your concern is that 180 is right up against that lot line, and how is that going to be accommodated, because that has windows over 100 built over 100 years ago. So the next speaker is. Does anyone have any questions, first of all, for Mr. Joint before we go on? Okay. Isabella Borowski at 3444 Warley Court.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I just wanted to clarify, that's my home address. So my name is Isabella Borowski, and my parents, Maria and Henrik Chibiwo, they're the immediate neighbors. So they're at 184 Queens Avenue.
Okay, that's
So
important.
I'm the daughter. I've lived there for 15 years before I moved to Mississauga, but I'll be speaking on behalf of them due to a little bit of a language barrier there.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm representing, the 184 Queens Avenue.
Okay.
So as I said, we've lived there for 15 years. Sorry, could I continue?
Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, okay. So again, I'm here on behalf of my parents and really their grandchildren, my children, Victoria and Adrian, my husband. We spend a lot of time at my parents' house. The beautiful, the private, sun-warm backyard and the walks to the lakeshore. I mean, that property there is magnificent. So we ask that the Committee of Adjustment not allow the proposals of the two large 2-story buildings on this property and not allow the variances. So the big ones that are impacted to us, and I'm getting a little emotional because I grew up there. So the setback, the 32% less than minimum, huge impact. The maximum height, which is 14% more, huge impact. And the big one is the north side lot plan, which is having the rear platform proposed. Again, very big impact on my parents' property. So again, the proposed additional driveway will very negatively impact the natural drainage, and it's going to reduce the safety for the pedestrians. So we're going to be watching for additional cars pulling out from second driveway now. And we don't want to eliminate the green spaces, because as a result, they will be eliminated. Again, diverting the rainwater into the from the melting snow. I know we're already overwhelming the sewage treatment plants, so let's not allow that. I know that Mature trees and shrubs are not a big impact, but they still are. And there's a lot of them that were planted by my mom and the older neighbors there. The sun access is going to be very greatly diminished. So again, my parents have a beautiful vegetable garden there, and they harvest it. They get the vitamins D, you know, it helped them through the COVID times. They go out there, they enjoy it. So by having that property there, that will be greatly diminished. The loss of privacy, again, due to the real platform there, not a very favorable thing, where we're enjoying the property very nicely now. Again, I wanted to stress that we don't object to new houses and, you know, new neighbors living in new homes. However, not at the expense of just overcrowding, adding the driveways, increasing traffic into our already so busy streets, reducing the natural drainage, the sunlight restrictions. We hear it all the time, environment, you know, so please listen to our concerns. And we hope that our voices mean something here. And one thing that's, I think, a little important here, I wanted to address, when the property was being put up for sale back in 2016, we were approached. They wanted to pay us cash, I'm meaning myself and my parents, to sell a little bit of the side property there. And I think we understand now why, because they knew that they couldn't build the two properties on that size of a lot. So again, we did not allow, you know, we did not want to sell them the extra property so they could build the two houses that are being proposed right now. And I think that's it for me. And I would really hope that everybody can see, and it is us who live there. We enjoy the beautiful natural sunlight that we have there right now. So not to be taken away from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barroso. Just point out to you, like, it looks like a couple of these lots are bigger, 196, 182 than your parents' lot or some others. And, you know, I guess you're talking by having two families instead of one family. There's more traffic and there's more cars, but the city has the policy of they're trying to encourage affordable housing. So to make two houses here does have some community benefit. Otherwise, I think, as the agent said, someone could build a huge one, like a monster home, a 4,000 square foot house on that one lot, which would still have the same issues with massing and drainage, but in this case, you're getting two houses out of the deal. Which promotes, you know, more housing in the city. So those arguments cut both ways, I guess. But it's up to the committee to decide whether this is worthy of support or not. So the next speaker is, and I'm glad we know you're at 184, is the neighbor on the other side at 180 Queens, Hugh Rinaldi. So I'm glad we have both adjacent neighbors with us here today to express their views. So Mr. Rinaldi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask staff to be prepared. Yeah, that's the document. Thank you very much, staff, if you could bring that up. And I just want to thank all of you for your patience and staying late to hear our concerns. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee of Adjustment for Etobicoke. My name is Hugh Rinaldi, and my wife and I own the property at 180 Queens Avenue, directly south of 182. What we understand from Toronto's official plan in section 415 is that development in established neighborhoods will respect and reinforce the existing physical character of the neighborhood, that proposed development will be materially consistent with the prevailing physical character of properties in both the broader and immediate contexts, and that no change will be made through rezoning, minor variance, consent, or other public action that are of keeping with the physical character of the neighborhood. This proposal, we believe, fails to meet the majority of these criteria, and many of the proposed variances, especially the side setback, reduced frontage, and increased main wall height, are not minor in their impact. On these grounds, we do not believe the variances should be granted or the lot split. If the staff could slowly scroll through that document in front of them, this is basically a walk from the south at Stanley Avenue up Queens Avenue. And while heritage planning's determined that 182 doesn't meet the criteria for heritage designation, its history tells us a lot about how this section was built. If you could just slowly scroll through that document, please. The builder, Robert Herod, who built and lived in 182, bought several lots and built many of the houses along this stretch, including ours. And he and others laid out the houses to work with and complement one another. Where a house is closer to its property line as ours is, the house on the other side, such as 182, has a driveway, so there is ample space between the houses. The resulting neighborhood is airy and spacious, with light coming into houses from the front and sides. We believe this is something that two tall, blocky, narrow houses crammed together on significantly undersized lots will break. The applicant has provided a supporting document with pictures of similar homes in the neighborhood. Looked at in context, these homes are not similar to the proposed dwelling, nor do they represent the prevailing physical character of the neighborhood, as you can see. In looking at the applicant's first three examples of split lots, all have more space on each side than the proposed dwellings will. The examples are closer to the layout of the street, with space provided by driveways on one or both sides of the property, and none of the abutting homes where the buildings are closest have significant window space facing the example buildings. The only example actually on this section of street is 212A and B Queens. And if you could just scroll ahead to the top of the last page, please. This property has a driveway on each side, consistent with the prevailing layout of the street and providing much more space. This property also has a wider frontage, 7.7 and 8.48 meters than proposed. And I think it's very important to note that they did not receive a wall height variance and did not request one as far as I know. And so that's 212 there, and you can see the space and how it fits in with the surrounding homes. If you could switch to my letter of objection from February 16th and go to page 5 where there's a diagram showing wall height. Our home has 8 windows on the north side abutting the proposed dwellings, bringing light into the basement stairway and bathroom, kitchen and sunroom, the only source of light in the upstairs hallway, and most significantly, the dormer to the master bedroom. The master bedroom has 3 small windows, the dormer windows, and 2 skylights. And on many gray winter days, it is dramatically apparent how much light the dormer windows provide.
Mr. Rinaldi, you have 1 minute.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm being a bit delayed in trying to show diagrams here. I do only have a couple of paragraphs. I am very cognizant of time, sir.
Okay.
And we believe constructing an overheight wall only a few feet away will drastically reduce the incoming light. Our home was designed to fit the pattern of the street and work with 182 Queens Avenue. Yes, go to page 5 there, please. Blocking the dormer windows and the others in this way will significantly reduce the livability and value of our home. And here you can see where our dormer is and the existing height and what the proposed height would be. And if you just scroll to the next page, I have an image that illustrates what the impact. That's currently the view from those windows. And if you scroll just a little bit more, this is basically what the view from those windows will look like with the building. It's very difficult to believe the architect or developer took the look of the street or nearby properties into account. The only support the developer has provided is 6 pictures of nearby properties, only one of which is on Queens Avenue. The support for this application is precedent, but that seems to be, we need a bit smaller frontage, a bit more height, a bit less green space, which is also one of the things Urban Forestry pointed out, not just the tree. And it is changing the neighborhood of the prevailing character of the neighborhood. I thank you very much for your time and consideration this evening and for staying again late to hear this application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rinaldi, very much. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Rinaldi before we move on to the last two speakers on this application? Okay, next speaker, Kathleen Kit Roca at 86 Superior.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies, chairman. Thank you for your time this evening. I will be brief. Okay. I live on 86 Superior Avenue, and my backyard actually overlooks this property in discussion. A couple of things I would like to see if you could consider the green space and the reduction of green space. I think that's one of the primary concerns, if not a primary concern in Etobicoke, to regreen itself. And another thing I would like you to consider is the setbacks on the north side and on the south side, so that you can properly determine if that's going to provide some type of habitable space or some type of peaceful space for both neighbors on the north and the south side.
Okay, is that, that's it? You said you were
That's
going to be
it.
brief. That is brief. Thank you. Any questions for the speaker before we move on to the last speaker, Charlotte Sheesby at 9 Stanley Avenue?
I'm sure you're tired. I'm tired too. So I was actually going to speak to the heritage issue, but now that it's off the table, I guess I won't. But I just wanted to point out one thing in that Robert Herod, and one of my interests in this matter, because I live about a little over a block away on Stanley Avenue, is that Robert Herod, who lived in this house and who built both 180 and 182, actually also as a make work project was commissioned by the vice president of Eaton's in the 1940s to build a series of houses that are directly across the street from me. So it's the entire lower section of Stanley and goes up Albert. And those houses were actually identified as a cultural heritage landscape during the Mimico 2020 process. So that was just another thing that spoke to me in terms of preserving Mr. Herod's home. The other thing that I can speak to and would like to speak to is the landscaping and the urban forestry issue. So I'm sorry, but I don't remember the name of the person who spoke for the applicant. But I believe she said that unlike the report from Max Dita at Urban Forestry, that the tree would not be impacted. But I'm looking at the site plan, and it looks to me like part 2. So one of the homes, the tree is smack in the middle of the driveway. And I believe that the urban forestry report says that the driveway and also excavation work would destroy the tree. So I think in the interests of being factually correct, I think that has to be pointed out. The other thing I just wanted to point out is because I successfully opposed 2 applications at 11 and 15 Stanley that were to do the very same thing, to split the lots and build 2 very large, tall homes, and which would have significantly impacted our urban forests. The decisions at TLAB that were in my favor spoke to the urban forestry issue and the fact that just because there is a condition possible, if the Committee of Adjustment grants the application, even though urban forestry has recommended a denial, what TLAB pointed out is that just because there is a condition doesn't mean it has to be done, and that it's very important that we protect our urban forest. Both those decisions went to review, and they were both went in my favor during review. So I agree with what Mr. Rinaldi said. I think that while there are some of these tall houses being built on split lots in Mimico, it's certainly not the prevailing form. And I've lived here for 34 years.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sheesby.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Sheesby or any other neighbors who've weighed in? I just was, as you're talking, I'm looking, I don't see any, I think it came up earlier too, maybe another application, who can tell by now, that there is no landscape variance front or rear. Obviously, you were concerned with the amount of landscaping, obviously 2 houses versus 1. Or 2 houses compared to the existing house in any event. So anyway, let's go back to Mrs. Evangelista to respond to the concerns of the neighbors. And then we'll take it into committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of comments that I would like to address. And we'll start off with the landscaping, okay? the reference that forestry is, what they're commenting on is tree number 1, which is an actual city tree. And that's the tree they're concerned about. Tree number 2 which is the tree in front of the home, which is on private property. We can remove that tree as of right. It's a cedar. It's an eastern white cedar, and we can remove it. It is not indigenous to, and it's not native to Canada. It's not one of our species. And I would like to add that we do not have, even though we are asking to sever the lot, we do not have landscaping variances, not in the front and not in the back. The tree number 1, which is forestry, as I said, is making reference to, is on city property. It's being protected. It's well away from construction, and it is being protected. So that is addressed. Now, a couple of comments. I understand, change in the neighborhood is, it can sometimes be quite perplexing. However, we also have to recognize that, neighborhoods will not stay frozen in time. They're subject to physical change in the form of additions and infill homes. So I provided several pictures. Now, the comment that there's no characteristics of this home to other homes in the neighborhood, as we've seen and as I've mentioned, this is an eclectic area. We have many different types. We have homes with flat roofs. We have homes with peaks. We have homes with dormers. So does it fit? Will it live harmoniously within the neighborhood? Absolutely. I respectfully submit that it will. Now, I would like to add, we do not have an overall height on these two homes. But I would like to add that 180 does have a main wall height of 9.25 meters. Our overall height is 9.42 meters. We are asking for a main wall height of 8 meters. So that the picture that Mr. Rinaldi, with respect, that he showed, I can't say that it's to scale, because we went and, when we measured the property, we measured to be very, to be respectful to the neighborhood, to be respectful to the character of the neighborhood. So we do have the peaks. We're not introducing a flat roof so that it will fit into the character of the neighborhood. So with respect, and again, we should not, neighborhoods should not stay frozen in time. And when you take a drive through this neighborhood, even a walk through the neighborhood, you'll see that there is a mixed bag of different styles of homes. So, and with respect, what we are submitting is not egregious. It's a 2,200, each one is a 2,200 square foot home. The side yards, 180, they have a side yard of 0.60. They have windows. I understand they have windows. We have not, we have one window at the bedroom window because under OBC, we have to have a window. When we get to it and we get to building, if we can frost it, we'll do that if they're concerned about privacy. But the side yards that we are requesting is, again, characteristic to the neighborhood. You'll see that the submission that I have included all the pictures. I included what the FSIs are, what the side yards are. And, when we speak to the character of the neighborhood, we have, main wall heights of 9.47 meters, 8.06 meters, 7.94 meters. We have side yard setbacks of 0. We have side yard setbacks of 0.62 and 0.61 on Queens. And just down the street, 0.44, 0.50, 0.34. So again, I respectfully submit that this is characteristic to the neighborhood. What we've the owners, they took great care in designing a home so that it does fit in, so that there are the peaks and that match, you know, different houses within and around the area. So, you know, again, I submit that what we are proposing, we don't have an overall height. We have no landscape variances. We don't have a length variance. We have a very slight coverage requesting, you know, an additional 25 square meters. So for this, I respectfully submit that what we have and what you have in front of you is characteristic to the neighborhood. And it is something that is growing in time. This, I believe, would fit more in the neighborhood than building a 2-story, 4,200 square foot. That would be shadowing. That would eliminate your light and your air and your maintenance, having a large home like that. And moving forward under the provincial growth plan, this is the direction we're taking. You know, not 4,200 square feet homes in areas such as this that's close to GO stations and TTC. So for this, Mr. Chair, members, I respectfully submit that the applications that you have in front of you is characteristic to the neighborhood, and hopefully you agree, and I do submit that it does fit and it is compatible.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Evangelista. Any follow-up questions for anyone, Mrs. Evangelista or any of the neighbors, or are we ready for a motion? And just remember, there are conditions of approval from engineering and construction services. Yeah, there's no planning, and there is urban forestry.
Yes.
Archaeology? Okay. Okay.
Archaeology. I just want to ask a very quick question. Has the applicant actually consulted with the neighbor whose window is severely impacted by the new development? I mean, it seems to me that, you know, if you're going to block off somebody's window like that, you really need to have a word with them. That's all.
Through you, if I can respond, through you, Mr. Chair, Madam, I reached out, I hand-delivered packages to the neighborhood, okay, to all the homes beside, in front, and behind, with a letter, elevations, my contact information, my emails. I reached out to everybody. I did. So at any given time, I could have received a phone call. I've been on the site a few times, and you know, we were there. I made that attempt a long time ago, over 2 months ago, that I've made the attempt to discuss, and they could have reached out to me and said, listen, let's talk about this. But nobody reached out to me.
Okay, going forward though, should you get permission to build, would you have that conversation with your neighbor regarding the obstruction of his window?
Most definitely, and through you, Mr. Chair, most definitely, and that's why I reached out.
And I think you actually said that in your rebuttal, that there'll only be one bedroom window because of OCS, Ontario Building Code, and that you would either frosted, but you mentioned that you would work with the neighbor in terms of dealing with as you know, privacy issues, and it goes both ways. And they don't want anyone looking in through their windows into their property. So I think you said there are no windows other than a bedroom window on that elevation.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions, or is someone ready to weigh in with a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to weigh in.
Yep.
What we're looking at here is a lot that has 50% more frontage than the minimum required by zoning. So there are really two scenarios for this property. One is to maintain the lot size and potentially attract a 4,200 square foot house, or to approve this consent and accommodate two 2,200 square foot houses. So I think, first of all, with respect to the consent, I think that the scenario accommodating two 2,200 square foot homes is much preferable than leaving the lot as is and not severed. With respect to the variance, the frontages are about 25% less than required by zoning. The lot areas are just a little bit less than required. FSI, a little bit more than required. All in all, I find the assortment of variances we're looking at today to satisfy the 4 tests under the Planning Act. So I would recommend approval subject to urban forestry conditions 1 and 3 and the conditions requested by engineering and construction services and transportation.
Okay, what about Mr. Carvalini just mentioned archaeology?
Yes, the Heritage Preservation Services archaeology section.
Oh, so that's part of those conditions. So we don't have to.
The February 17th memo still stands. They're looking for the 4 conditions prior to the certificate of official being assigned.
Okay, and I think Mrs. Evangelist, you said that was.
I'm happy to add that. I'm happy to add that component, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Heritage plan.
Okay. Seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion.
That's sufficient.
Did I see Ms. Alderson's hand go up?
The chair is frozen. Can you hear me? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Hello? You can hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. What I said was I'm quite content to amend my motion to include the conditions requested by, I believe it's Heritage Planning Department.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that right, Philip?
Archaeology.
Yes,
Archaeology.
Taylor, it's
archaeology.
Yes, but it is archaeology.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm happy to second that motion. I think, based on its proximity to public transit, I think that having the lot severed and one way that they have proposed is probably the best case scenario.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Alderson. So we have a motion seconded. All in favor? You have unanimous approval, Mrs. Evangelista. Thank you very much. And we are done for this evening.
You.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. And we'll see you next time. We'll see you next time, some of you anyway. Okay.